I don't like this, Thera, we should head back. At least talk to Sonia before we go in there. Ben told her with apprehension filling his voice as they stood outside the guard's room. She responded with a shake of her head. Ben, if what he's saying is right, then I need to do this. I can't risk people dying just to avoid dealing with the guy. Besides, the guards will be in the room. Well, I will be too. For all the good it will do. Hey Myriad, what's the word? Damn. As the guards walked them to where Roan was being kept, they explained the situation. The man had simply walked up to the gate and demanded to be allowed to go through so he could see Thera. The guards were aware of him, of course, and not going to answer to the demands of a dangerous madman, so they had brought him in for questioning. He was happy to talk, even owning up to attacking them in the woods and running away once he failed, only to come back for his main plan, the one that would win the heart of the woman he thought he loved. They entered the main room and found Roan standing, chains around his arms and legs binding him to the floor. It was Ben's first chance to see the man, and he was taken aback. Roan was a hominid type, having a generally humanoid appearance, but his eyes were clearly compound, and his bare arms had a thick chitin shell on the top, with a softer flesh on the underside. What really unnerved him was how the moment Thera stepped into the room his eyes were immediately pulled to her, as if Ben and the guards didn't exist. In the back of Ben's mind he idly wondered how he was even sure it was her, given that she was wearing a new cloak and her magic couldn't be leaking through. But the thought passed when the sound of his deep, almost hungry breathing caught his ears. They stopped far outside of the man's reach, but Ben continued to hold Thera's hand as he had been guiding her, partly to support her and partly to make sure she didn't get too close. He couldn't help but not want her anywhere near the guy, and judging from how tense she felt, he thought she was feeling the same. "Oh, Thera, it's been too long," he told her, seeming to be carving her image into his mind as he did. "Hello, Roan. I was told if I came to see you, you'll put a stop to all this," she quietly responded. He licked his lips, and Ben found himself immensely grateful that she couldn't currently see through her cloak's hood. "Of course, once I save the town, you'll be mine. I'll be sure to give you the top position among my wives. You deserve no less after all." "Roan, how could you think leading a pack of monsters here could possibly win me over?" she asked slightly incredulously. "Know my heart. You have it all wrong. I lead them here to send away, freeing the town of danger. A man who could do such a thing is quite powerful, is he not? Truly he would be fit for a woman such as you." He jerked forward and strained against his chains, desperately trying to reach her, but only causing her to take a step back behind Ben, and Roan's eyes moved to him. "Just wait, Thera. I'll show you I'm more fit to be by your side than some filthy artisan." "You know who I am?" he asked in some surprise. Sure, he had been attacked by the guy, but as far as he could tell they never even got close enough to see each other. "How could I not know the man who has the nerve to be with my woman?" he snarled. "If you hadn't run that day, you could have bled out comfortably, you know, fighting a man in a warrior's death. Instead, I needed to sick my pet on you. How did you even see me coming those times?" "I have friends in high places," he said as an offhand comment, before he fully processed what Roan had said. "Wait, those times? When else have you attacked me except with the Allseer?" Wait. There had only been one other time he'd been attacked, in what he had thought had been a random mugging attempt. Apparently it wasn't a mugging or very random at all. "That was you. So you didn't even know? Surprising. Though not as much as my surprise when I came back and saw you with her." "Oh, I'm sorry, my heart. I know you said to leave, but I had to come back and see you, to gain the strength for what I needed to do. But imagine my surprise to see this man walking with you down the street. I couldn't just let it stand." "Ben, what's he talking about?" she asked him, grabbing his hand even tighter. "Remember when I thought I was almost mugged a month or two ago? I think he saw when you took me to go and get a plant that day. Oh, I saw you. It gave me the resolve I needed. You're a desirable woman, Thera. I needed to make sure you realized you're already mine before another man tried to get you." "Then why did you attack her?" Ben asked with anger rising in his voice. "Your stupid Allseer could have killed her. It was going to kill you, you insolent bastard. My precious pet would never possibly harm Thera." From the way it charged that day, Ben couldn't say he believed that. From what Thera had told him, he wasn't a great tamer. But then again, the situation they were currently in made him question how much better he was with a staff enchanted with high-level taming. It was hard to imagine a bad tamer could pull this off. He was about to retort, but Thera quietly stopped him. Ben, we just need to get him to send off his monsters. After that, this is over. She let go of his hand and took a step forward, letting Roan see her put distance between her and Ben. All right, so I just need to watch you send away your beasts so you can prove yourself to me, and that's the end of it. And then you'll finally be mine. Thera said nothing to this, instead turning to one of the guards. I agree to accompany you for this. Take him to the south gate and let's get it over with. One guard left to call more into the room, removing the chains binding him to the floor while adding more to ensure he couldn't move freely, and walked him out, with Thera and Ben following a little ways behind to ensure he couldn't see Ben leading her by the hand. It wasn't too late in the day. There were still people up and around to see a group of guards moving to the south wall, pulling along a man raving like a lunatic. Oh, Thera, I don't even need another woman once I have you if that's what it will take to make you happy. I'll go through any shame. Nothing is too great. On and on he went as more eyes were drawn to them all, and Thera shrank down even closer to Ben. Even without being able to see the stares of everyone around, hearing his screams and declarations were enough to make anyone uncomfortable, but she suffered through it in silence, just wanting to get this over with so she could go back home. As they finally approached the gate, a number of the town's adventurers were already there, waiting and glaring at them. What's going on? Ben asked the nearest guard. With as many monsters as he said he's lured here, we need to play it safe in case he decides to attack the town after all. All of the available adventurers have been summoned here while we were bringing him over. When Roan saw the crowd of his former peers, he stopped his ravings and his face changed to one of rapture. Yes, this is the way it should be. Truly great heroic deeds and heartfelt proposals both need audiences. Thera, after the town is saved, everyone here really will know you're mine. No other fool will dare try something against the wife of the hero of Stonewall. Many of the nearby adventurers could hear Roan's deranged shouts and were making disgusted, angry faces. Most at him, but still a few found their way towards Thera, no doubt thinking she made him like this. For her part, she tried to remain calm as she spoke. All right, Roan. Send away the monsters and save the town for me then. Of course, my heart. Bear witness to me. He took his staff from one of the guards and approached the southern gate with Thera, Ben, and plenty of the guards following behind him. As Ben stared out into the field towards the forest, he didn't see any monsters, but Roan was quick to change that. Come out, my pets! He screamed into the night, as 5 swords wielded by a variety of guards were quickly pulled on him. What the hell do you think you're doing? The leading one screamed. Ah, my poor fool. Can it really be said I saved the town from danger if no one can even see the danger? As soon as they come out, I'll send them away, not to worry. Though as his pets started to pour out, worry they did. Myriad had been right, there were at least 30 different monsters, all of them different species and many of which Ben had never seen before, while most of them looked half-starved. There was no way to easily keep a herd that big fed by one person after all. Why? But before he could get an answer, Roan continued on with his performance. Oh, monsters! Leave this land in peace, never to bother it again. He yelled out, as if he hadn't just called them all his pets only moments before. That's where the biggest issue began. Perhaps only 2 of the entire group left, the rest stayed, staring at the town. Roan clearly wasn't expecting this and grew agitated, yelling out once more. I said leave. Go off, you stupid animals. But no matter how he yelled, they weren't obeying. In fact, they started to take steps closer, walking towards the gate. The guards pulled Roan inside and started screaming orders, securing the man and starting to close the gate. In his head, Ben heard his God sigh. What's going on? Why didn't that work? Then what the hell do we do? How many of them will die if we wait and do that? Okay, screw that. I think I have an idea. As some of the guards pulled a screaming Roan off to a cell somewhere, the rest gathered with the adventurers to form a plan, leaving Thera and Ben alone. This is all my fault, she said. I drove that bastard insane and now people are going to die. He didn't know what he could possibly say, so he didn't even try to raise her spirits, instead asking more important questions. Thera, are you all right with facing a bit of danger to try and help save the town? There's nothing I can do. Maybe if my magic was better, but I'm a level 1 Earth Mage, Ben. I can't save anyone. That's not what I asked. Are you willing to try? After a moment of silence, she gave him a nod. Yes. And will you trust me? A longer silence. Yes, I trust you, Ben. He smiled. All right, come with me. He took her hand and led her over to where the group of adventurers and guards were arguing over what to do. Let's just wait them out. For how long? They wouldn't obey their tamer. Why would they just leave? If we attack now, we may be able to catch some by surprise. Sure, some. But how many of us will die after? And what if they make it through the gate? We don't know how long we have until they attack, said a woman who appeared to have the most authority among the adventurers. If anyone has any options, say them now. Otherwise, we try to attack while we still have the light. I have an option, Ben called out from the back of the group. The woman eyed him for a moment, as well as casting a more complicated look at Thera next to him. And who might you be? Ben, 6th rank adventurer. Let me and Thera go around one of the other gates and try to draw as many as we can towards us. We'll bury as many as we can with Earthwave. While we're doing that, any mages and archers can fire from the walls at the stragglers. An interesting idea, but can you do it? She asked. The young woman is known to have poor control over her magic. Unless you're also a competent earth mage? Nope, just a humble craftsman. But unless you have any other viable options better than just attacking, you have nothing to lose from letting us try. The woman let out a sigh and rubbed her head. Does anyone have a better idea than letting these two idiots get themselves killed? Let them die, yelled one of the adventurers. It's the girl's fault we're in this mess anyway. The moment the words left his lips, the man was on the ground, a large rock having struck his chest and knocking him over. Ben had been looking at the woman the entire time, but was barely able to see her throw it. Listen up and listen well. The guild has already admitted responsibility for what happened with Roan. It's our fault for not taking the passive magic effects Thera warned us about seriously. As guildmaster of this branch, if you have a problem with that decision, you have a problem with me. Do I make myself clear? A variety of yeses, yes ma'ams, and other confirmation of her statement echoed from the surrounding adventurers. Good. Now, as I was saying, does anyone else have a better option? Silence fell amongst the crowd and the guildmaster let out a sigh. That's what I thought. All right then, try your plan. When it fails, hightail it back to the gate. Hopefully you won't die in the process. Not to worry, ma'am, we got this. Ben, what in the infinite hells did you mean we've got this? Thera yelled as they made their way through the western gate and headed south where the monsters were prowling. There's no way we can do this. Then why didn't you speak up? You were talking with the guildmaster. I couldn't just say anything in a situation like that. Well, it doesn't matter. Thera, I asked you to trust me. Can you still do it? I will. I just really hope we both don't end up dead for it. Especially since Earthwave is a high-level spell. You know, there's no possible way I can cast it right. Ben shook his head. Wrong. The only reason Earthwave is a high-level spell is because of its mana cost, an issue you don't personally have. How can you possibly know that? I've read up a bit on the 10 basic magics at least. Okay, but regular earth bullets break my staves. There's no way it can survive an Earthwave. They break the staves I can make. The last one Falk gave you hasn't suffered any wear and tear yet, and as much as I hate to admit it, it's the only reason this is an option. You should be able to manage, I'll just need to help. You focus on preparing the spell, I'll focus on making sure the staff won't break. There's just one more thing. Oh gods, what else could there be? I'll have to connect with you. She could only sigh. Fine. Compared to everything else, it's not like that matters much. Well, we'll see, he said awkwardly. This will be my first time using the skill on a person since it leveled up, so it may feel a little weird. If it will keep us alive, I'll deal with it. They got within view of the monsters, but it didn't look like they had been noticed yet. Many of them had gotten fairly close to the main gate though. Should here be good, do you think? Yeah, I think it will be good. Let's get ready, and once you're about to start the spell, pull off your hood to attract them. Okay? Alright, let's do this. Gods, this is crazy. She held her staff forwards and Ben wrapped one hand around the staff and the other around Thera's hand. He took a deep breath and connected. The feeling was intense, like he was about to be blown away. The moment he connected to her, he felt a more extreme pressure than he had ever felt in his life, like he was trying to push off a car that was driving into him, and he realized he was feeling the force of her mana. He couldn't let it distract him, though, and he pushed his focus skill to the limits to keep his attention on everything. Thera's mana, which was nearly overwhelming, her emotional state, which was horribly scared from the situation she found herself in, as well as just enough trust in him to go through with his crazy plan, and something else moving out of her and into her staff. Her earth magic skill. Ben felt it pass through the staff he was holding, more aware of the enchantments Falk had laid on it than he had ever been before, and knew that if he tried to lay a single strengthening spell on it, that it would probably break. That was how many enchantments he'd forced into it to help make it manageable for her magic. So instead, he didn't use his enchanting. He used his crafting, passing mana through it at the same time as Thera, and doing the opposite of what he would usually do as he forged something. Instead of making it easier to work with using his mana, he made it harder, selectively strengthening areas he felt becoming more fragile as Thera prepared her own spell, and draining his mana in a way that his low-intensity skills normally never would. She tore off her hood and all the monsters turned at once, and as if they were a singular herd moved to run towards them, hunger in their eyes. They were far enough away that it would be a minute before the fastest one got to them, and they passively watched as the seconds ticked by, Ben remaining calm and focusing on the task at hand, ensuring that the staff would hold for the spell, but felt her panic begin to spike from the approaching horde. Thera, he told her with as much confidence as he could convey. You can do this. Her panic dropped slowly and the burden on him to hold the staff together eased up as she got a bit more control of her magic. When the nearest of them was a short 15 feet away, she finished activating her spell. The earth rose up. Tens of meters of earth around them lifted from the ground and started to roll into itself like a wave, dragging each beast it caught in an ocean of dirt with it, and it didn't stop. The waves continued, flying out and devastating the land around them, altering the landscape and even reaching the town walls, tearing chunks out of it as it went. As dust filled the air and a scene of chaos and destruction appeared before them, the last staff she had gotten from Falk shattered in their hands, and no monsters could be seen amongst the carnage. Oh gods, Ben! My earth magic level just increased, and we're alive, and we did it! She had him in a hug before he knew it, completely catching him off guard, but he hugged her back weakly. That's fantastic news, Thera, he said, only barely getting the words out before falling into her and losing consciousness. Ben cracked open his eyes to find himself in a familiar bed. He turned to the woman sitting in a chair to his side and spoke up. We really should stop meeting like this. I agree completely, Sonia told him. If only a certain patient would stop getting so injured all of the time. So what's wrong with me this time? He actually felt fine now that he was awake, and figured she had already done whatever treatment he needed, but he got an unexpected answer. Nothing was really wrong. You were just suffering from mana exhaustion. We just needed to wait for your mana levels to fill up and eventually wake up. Wait. How could I possibly be mana exhausted? I would personally like to know the same thing. I've heard it was possible to happen to people with no magic skills if they happen to use multiple other skills at the same time, but I've never actually seen a case in person. Of course, from what Thera told me and I've heard from everyone showing up, it shouldn't be too surprising. She gave him a stern look for a minute before softening up. You don't know how badly I want to be mad at you right now. You put yourself and my niece in extreme danger with that stunt. You both could have been killed. You're right. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. He didn't personally consider himself to be someone who would rush into danger. He felt like he'd been swept up in the moment, not wanting anyone in his new home to have to die. Sonia let out a long sigh. You know, I was expecting you to fight me a little, not just immediately give up like that. With everything else, how am I supposed to stay mad? Everything else? After the guildmaster identified you as being mana exhausted, she carried you back to the house with Thera in tow before she had someone run to get me. Since you've been asleep, a lot of the adventurers who had seen you both fight came to convey their respects, as well as apologize to Thera about how they've treated her. It wasn't everyone, of course. Many people get stuck in their ways and opinions, but it looks like she has more people on her side now than when Roan started this whole situation to begin with. That's fantastic. He cheered before regaining his calm. And what about Roan? Last I saw, he was being dragged away. That, I'm not sure. They're going to send him off to try and get some mental help with a light mage, but it's hard to say how much of this was an effect of Thera's magic and how much was just him. Even if he loses all of the lingering effects her magic had on him, he may just be a naturally unbalanced individual. The proper authorities will be keeping an eye on him for a while. Anyway, don't worry too much on that. Someone's been rather worried about you for a while now. Sonia turned to the door and pulled Ben's attention to it as well, making him see a pair of golden eyes peeking through the side. I need to go prepare dinner. Why don't you two chat till it's ready? As she left, she ushered Thera in, and it ended with the two of them alone. Thankfully, Ben hadn't needed to be undressed this time, so he still had the dignity that came with wearing pants when he sat up. How are you feeling? She asked him. Well rested. Sonia mentioned things have been going well since I've been out. Her cheeks flushed a bit before Ben's eyes. Well, a lot of them were on top of the wall watching. Apparently they started throwing spells when all the monsters got too close, but I didn't notice since it was taking my all just to use that spell. But everyone who saw it was impressed, and I guess it made some people reevaluate me a bit. That's great. Well, I'm pretty sure plenty of people still consider me the cause of all this, but I should at least be able to go outside again. She looked uncomfortable for a minute before speaking up again. Ben, I know you don't think this is my fault. It's not, he asserted as confidently as he could. I know you think that, she said with a small smile. I could feel your confidence in me when we connected. You didn't doubt I could succeed. Her smile quickly vanished. Which makes it worse that this really was because of me. Thera dash. Ben, let me talk please. I want to explain myself to you. She took a deep breath. After Roan was kicked out of the guild, I intentionally used my charm on him. All right, he didn't see the issue. Is that really all you have to say? I mean, I'm sure you had a reason, right? Well, after he was kicked out of the guild, he approached me on an empty street. I was scared and I took off my hood, then specifically used my charm while yelling for him to go away. He immediately ran for his life. It had been so long since I'd seen him, I was wondering if he never stopped, that maybe he died running, but it looks like all it did was push him completely over the edge. Oh, that's pretty neat. I knew dark magic had a lot of mental aspects to it, but does charm include mind control? He asked with more curiosity than anything else, which bothered Thera in itself, but she still gave him a negative. Not exactly mind control, but it will depend a lot on the target's resistance and personal willpower. Roan's dark resistance seemed pretty terrible, and he was already mentally weak from being exposed to my magic repeatedly. I did this. Really? It sounds to me like a dangerous man approached you while you were alone and you defended yourself. I personally don't see any problem with that. She looked away from him while he spoke. Sometimes I wonder if you aren't really under my magic's effect, you know? Why else would you keep defending me? Because you're my friend, he told her with all the seriousness he could muster. I don't know what friendship means to you, but to me it means I'm in your corner and I'll have your back. If you do something I really think is wrong, I'll tell you. Hell, I'll give you a real earful if you need it, but otherwise I'm on your side. As he spoke, she started to blush again, but she turned back to him, not quite sure what to say. How was this boy so comfortable being upfront about his feelings so often anyway? Well, thanks. I guess I've never really had a friend who cared before. No problem. Now before we get up, mind if I try something? I guess not. What? I want to try connecting again. She seemed to hesitate a little but decided to give in and reached out her hand. Okay. But I don't know how you can be so comfortable with this. I feel so exposed. He could only shrug. I've done it a lot, I guess. With a houseplant. A very nice houseplant. Now anyway, let's just try this quick. He grabbed her hand and connected. Using his focus to its new and improved full potential, while also enjoying the growth of the connect skill. When they were connected before, a couple potential ideas had occurred to him, and as excited as he was to test the first two, the third one was the most immediately important. He could instantly feel the extent of her mana again, but it wasn't as violent as it was before. His skill leveling up seemed to make it easier to bear. He also thought he could hear a small muttering coming from her and realized it must be the main purpose of the skill starting to show itself. Well, what should have been the main? As interesting as mind reading could be, it wasn't super useful to him at the moment, even less so if the other party could hear his thoughts as well, so he pushed it to the side for the time being, another thing to look into later. No, instead what he did was activate his enchantment. He didn't have anything he could apply it to, but Thera was wearing a plain shirt instead of her cloak at the time, so he just started to apply it to that, first trying to lay the entire enchantment down as he regularly did, but finding it wouldn't work. The size needed to be too big, which made the enchantment flimsy, so instead he stretched it out, forming a string with it as he went. And it was working. He felt it behaving as he wanted it to, felt the mana bending to his will, before his eyes widened and he pulled his hand away, leaving the enchantment unfinished and connection broken. What's wrong? You seemed so interested in whatever you were doing, she asked in surprise after having the connection cut off so abruptly. Thera, this is a little awkward to say, but I need you to change shirts and bring this one back here. She put her arms over herself and gave him the sternest, least impressed look he'd yet seen from her. And why exactly is that? I need a little time before I explain exactly why, but I was applying an enchantment to it. The thing is, the enchantment ended up being huge, and your shirt definitely isn't a material that can handle it, so I'll need to remove it before it breaks. She quickly looked down at herself before letting out a sigh of relief. Well, at least you stopped before anything unfortunate happened. But I like this shirt. Since you went and used your skills on it without even asking, you better make sure it's fine when you take it off. Yeah. Sorry, Thera, my bad. Well, as long as you understand. Anyway, I'll go change. You can worry about taking off the enchantment after we eat. Come on and get ready, she told him with a smile, brushing away the minor unhappiness she just felt, and he smiled back. Good food and company sound great right about now. Ben sat down in the library, waiting for Leahy to show up for their day of lessons. It had been a week since they started, and Ben found himself positively shocked at how boring it could be to learn about a new world. Leahy was trying to teach him what she thought would be the most useful for him, and aside from basic common knowledge, that meant focusing on the things he would need to know if he intended to pursue a career as a craftsman and enchanter. A part of him considered looking into a different job path than either of those, but he had to be honest with himself that without access to magic, this was the only path he could see himself wanting, even if it meant no one else in the world would need him. His friends had been right, these skills suited him to a T. Besides, it was also a bit too negative to say that no one else would need him. As long as he found a teacher in one of the nearby towns or villages, he could train up his skills a bit and hopefully find a small, quiet place that could use someone with his talents. He would never make it rich that way, and it wouldn't be glamorous, but Ben could see a peaceful life of quietly improving himself to have plenty of personal merits. Well, at least for as long as the world wasn't conquered, and given the track record of every race and god stuck here, Ben wasn't feeling too great about those odds. It was horrifying to think that hundreds of worlds had already been taken over, so he simply didn't, instead getting up to browse some of the different titles around. Exploring the library had quickly become one of Ben's favorite things to do. With a little over 2,000 books in it, about a third were dedicated to the various gods. Leahy had told him on an earlier day that they mainly had books focusing on the smaller gods, who may be harder to find information on than any of the more famous ones in the world, and with some of them not getting their own dedicated books at all, but instead being lumped together with the pantheons they originally ruled with. After that, there were histories of the various races from before they were brought here, or at least what was remembered. Many came as a last resort, not having time to gather culturally relevant information, or in many cases not even having been in a civilization where the written word had been invented yet. In both cases, that meant that scholars of groups that were already established on the world would come to record whatever they could remember of their own beliefs and practices. This in itself led to a rather distorted view of their own personal histories. In some cases there had been warring between their own species when they were invaded, and through luck only members of one side would be saved, often leading to records that would state the savagery of their opponents as well as their conquerors. In other cases, information technology hadn't developed to the point on a given world that anything a person heard without seeing with their own eyes could truly be considered trustworthy. Even worse than that, though, were the cases where only an isolated group were saved, such as residents on a small island who weren't even aware their world was being conquered, right up until their god descended and carried them away, since it was unfortunately the safest choice to guarantee some survivors. Of course, with the gods around they could clear up some of this information, but Leahy had quickly informed him that the gods weren't all-knowing either, and many of them had originally kept a much looser eye on their worlds, coming to guide occasionally and responding to large enough prayers, but ultimately letting their peoples develop at their own pace. There had never been any urgency before, after all, so the information they could provide tended to be lacking. The last few books available to read were just an assorted selection of topics. The priests weren't expected to dedicate every waking moment to worship and guiding believers. Though some did, the rest of them used their leisure time for casual reading and other hobbies. These were the ones Ben tended to lean towards the most. Sure, they may seem a little plain when compared to learning of gods and lost worlds, but he didn't exactly have the best opinion of the gods for dropping him here to be completely unwanted. Hell, if the world was really going to end in 3 years, all they had done was sentence him to a second death, only a little farther off, and stop thinking about it. He wasn't going to fall down a depressive spiral. He was lucky to have a bit more time at all, and there was no guarantee they would lose. He was just being negative. He pulled a book at random from a shelf and half-heartedly flipped through it as he waited for Leahy to arrive, which only ended up being another couple minutes. "Good morning, Ben. I see you're making good use of your time before your lesson. What are you reading?" "Morning, Leahy. I guess I'm learning about a god named Slareth." Her eyes lit up when he said that. "Oh, a forest god, if I remember correctly. Are you perhaps considering Dash?" "I'm not taking a god," he said curtly. It was a conversation he'd had with her before. "I'm just saying he may not be a bad choice. Slareth is a smaller god. You have a much better chance of getting a gift skill from him after all, and as a god who represents forests, it would probably benefit you if you were to work with wood or stone. If I find a god that really speaks to me, I'll make sure to consider it, but I was just reading this to pass the time. So what's the lesson for today?" He not so subtly changed the subject, but Leahy let it go. It wouldn't do to force the matter on him, and it was doubtful if he could offer true faith to a god he was coerced into. "Depending on how you do today, it may actually be a shorter lesson. I'm going to try and teach you how to use your mana." "Wait, is there even any point? You already said I can't use magic, right?" "Well, that's still true. But there's more you can do with your mana than just magic. Magic just happens to be highly mana intense. However, all of your skills are going to use at least a little to properly power them, not to mention if you want to use any magic tools," she patiently explained to him. "Okay, sounds cool." It was already infinitely better than hearing about trade agreements and what nations and cities provided what resources. "How do I do it then?" "We'll try the more peaceful method first. If you can't get a feel for it, in an hour we'll try and shock your mana." "Not really sure I like the sound of that." "What's the peaceful method?" "Meditation. Lay down and try to focus on the energies inside of you." "Lay down here? The library floor? It should be quiet enough that you'll be free of any distractions. Go ahead." "Well, whatever." The explanation sounded like hippie nonsense to Ben, but he would give it a try. Besides, he couldn't really call it nonsense when he'd already been shown that magic was real. He laid on the ground, closed his eyes, and tried to feel some mysterious energy inside of him. "Well, that was a bust," he said as he opened his eyes. "It was a bit of a long shot anyway. That strategy works better for races that have an innate magic. Of course, it was supposedly a common way for different races to try to learn their magics before they came to this world, when full-fledged mages were more rare. But here, with the system in place, magic is a lot more viable to learn if you have the proper affinity. And there are mages around who can awaken your mana for you." "That sounds so much easier. Why didn't we lead with that?" "It can feel a bit unpleasant. You have to use one of the magics that can be applied directly to the body. Either light, life, death, dark, or time. Luckily for you, I have life magic. It and light are the most pleasant to go through." In desperation you could probably awaken it with one of the affinities I didn't mention, but that would actually be even more unpleasant than having death magic cast on you. Why's that? From everything I read, death magic sounds pretty unpleasant to experience. Let's take my water magic as an example. It would be a little hard to use since it's bound to you, but high-level mages can move the liquids in your body. I don't think I need to mention just how watery that can be. Ben's first thought was having his blood messed with, but why stop there? Wasn't there also brain and spinal cord fluids in him as well? He had a small shudder. Sounds pretty dangerous. It would be, but it's also not that easy to use your magic like that unless you try to specialize in it, which is why even death magic is considered an acceptable way to awaken it, though admittedly it's the last choice for most. On that happy note, let's get started. Sit on a stool with your back to me. He did as he was told and took a seat. She pulled up a stool behind him, sat down and pulled off his shirt, before placing her hands on his back. Leahy? Is it okay to do this in the library? I feel like it's not a great look if someone walks in. Ben, I may not look like it from your perspective, but I'm one of the oldest members of this church. I'd say it's more of an issue with how the rest of you hominid types age. You decay so quickly, she said, completely brushing off the idea that there could be an issue with his state of undress in a church library. Hominid types? He asked out of curiosity. Oh, that's just how similar builds are lumped together. Races that look like you or me, although Father Yen would qualify too. There's not much of a strict definition, it's mostly a case of you'll know it when you see it. Anyway, are you feeling it? Feeling what? She sighed. I swear, why did you need to have such high life resistance? It's really going to cause any healer you meet some trouble. Alright, I just need to up my mana flow. Let me know when you start to feel something. Ben continued to sit in silence, not perceiving anything with certainty no matter how much he tried, until Leahy grew impatient. Okay, you're going to feel this one. Sorry in advance. Wait, YH. His body fell from the chair and collapsed to the ground. Everything had pins and needles and he had to talk between gasps of breath. What was that? Leahy herself seemed exhausted, as she was unsteady on her chair and slid down next to him, also out of breath. Sorry, I had to supercharge you with mana. Used up most of my reserves. Can you feel it? He concentrated and thought he understood what he was looking for. The tingling throughout his limbs was her mana. He just needed to keep the feeling as it dissipated to get a better understanding of what his own might feel like. He focused, not wanting to miss a thing, as the door opened. Another of the priests came in, one Ben wasn't familiar with, and after seeing them both panting on the floor and Ben without his shirt on, closed the door and left without a word. Oh, I am definitely going to be hearing something about this, aren't I? Now Leahy, while I am aware of your actual age, you do know that not every priest is, correct? Yes, Father Yen, she said, an awkward blush covering her face and reaching the tips of her long ears. And Ben, did you not think to mention that finding a more appropriate place may be in order? I actually did. Yen let out a long sigh. I see. It seems young Ben isn't the one who needs lessons on the common sense of the world. Ben, for now retire to your room for the day. I'm going to need to have a long talk with your caretaker. Leahy shot him a pleading look which he pretended not to see. Of course, sounds good. You both have an excellent day. And with that he walked off, picked up a book, and enjoyed the rest of his day. After a couple weeks of talking to his client, having the item inspected and requests for improvements to be made, not to mention being given a variety of materials he deemed necessary to ensure it would succeed, Falk was finally on his way home. He left Craftsman Tower through the gate, coming out at the nearest city to Stonewall, and thought he would spend a little time shopping around before he found a cart he could take back home. After looking at some shops, he stopped in a cafe, got himself a drink and a snack, and made some small talk with the owner. So you heading out or coming back? Inquired a friendly mass of limbs of a species Falk wasn't able to place a name to. Coming back. I have a client I had to see, but gods am I happy to be on my way home. I'll tell you, some people are impossible to work with, no matter how well they pay. Ah, don't I know it. We get all sorts of interesting folks coming through. So are you from the city? Nah, I'm out in Stonewall, the hustle and bustle of the city ain't really for me. As Falk spoke, a few of the shop owner's limbs started twisting and shaking. Falk was no master of body language, especially when it came to other races, but he was fairly sure something was wrong. Hey, you okay? Don't need me to run and find a healer, do you? It was better to be safe and ask when you weren't sure about these things. No, I'm fine. So you only just got back today? That's right. So you haven't heard what happened then? He felt a lump form in the pit of his stomach. What are you talking about? Seeing that Falk didn't know anything, the owner explained what he'd heard had happened in the town about a week ago. Supposedly a tamer went insane and attacked the place, bringing dozens of monsters to destroy it in a fit of madness. They hadn't heard anything about a number of casualties, but in events like that there was an expectation that there would be some dead when he got back. The more he heard, the more he panicked. It must have been that bastard Roan. But what happened to Thera, Sonia, the boy? He couldn't take his sweet time anymore and thanked the owner for letting him know before finding the fastest cart he could and paying a premium to get back to his home. Usually it was a 5-day trip to the town for a more reasonable fare, but after waving some money around, Falk got back in 3 by the evening. He was let off by a gate far closer to his shop than Sonia's home, so he stopped there first, throwing open the door and calling out. It looked like Ben had grabbed some materials at some point, but that could have been weeks ago. Who knew where he could be now? Damn it all. I should have at least learned his address in case anything ever came up. Alright, don't panic. Thera or Sonia should know where he is. He tried his best to suppress the thought that that would only be if they were okay themselves. He ran to their home and banged on the door, only waiting a few seconds for Sonia to open it. Falk, you're finally back. It's Dash. Before she could get the words out, he had her wrapped in a powerful hug, though being mindful to not injure her with his strength. Sonia, I'm so glad you're all right. Is Thera okay? Is Ben? What? Yes, of course. They're just in the living room. Falk rushed past her, not noticing the tips of his old friend's ears flushing as he did. He burst into the living room and felt his whole body begin to relax upon finding Thera sitting down with a book, and Ben laying face first on the ground, seemingly mumbling to himself. No, there's no way to make the enchantment smaller. I already took some of the most appropriate materials in the shop. Of course I tried that. Who do you think I am? Maybe need to wait for a level up. As the boy continued to mutter, Thera looked up from her book and realizing her uncle had returned got up to see him. Uncle, welcome back. Your trip was a pretty long one this time. As she walked by Ben, she gave him a small kick to try and get his attention. Ben, stop talking to your god. Your teacher's back. If that's what he's doing, I think it's okay to put a god above me. He thought, a mild worry of some divine retribution crossing his mind before he pushed it to the side. I'm just glad to see you're all okay. I heard the town was attacked and rushed back as quick as I could. Oh, hey, Falk, Ben said as he ended his conversation with his god and lifted his face from the floor. Good to see you. Sorry to worry you, but everything's fine. Sonia came into the room and he turned to her, not wanting to make either of the young folk too uncomfortable with what he was going to ask. And what about casualties? I haven't seen it myself yet, but I heard the southern wall was destroyed. He'd verified the safety of the people he was most worried for, but he had other friends and acquaintances around as well. It would be best if Sonia could tell him who had died, so he wouldn't have to go house to house checking in on people. Instead, she shocked him. Nobody's dead and the south wall wasn't destroyed. It just saw a bit of damage when these two took on a herd of monsters. I'm sorry, I think I misheard. She couldn't be talking about the boy and his niece, but she just gave him a smile. Why don't we all have a seat and some drinks to catch Falk up on what's happened? As they sat around and caught him up, he became more and more shocked as the conversation went on. Roan was caught after almost destroying the town, and after a decision from his apprentice, he wasn't sure if he should call it bold or insane. The town was saved and nobody died. That wasn't even considering the fact that his plan had raised Thera's standing in the town considerably. Sure, some people thought worse of her, but pretty much any adventurer who had seen her use Earthwave had been talking about her powerful attack. Ben was basically forgotten about when people talked about the events of the day. And now here he was, only half listening to them talk about it as he scribbled and made notes in a notebook. Boy, What has you so occupied that you can't brag a little more about saving the town? Thera rolled her eyes. Don't mind him, uncle. After he woke up, he's been obsessed with some secret project he's thought of. He keeps pulling me in to help, and he won't even tell me what it is. Plus, all of his notes are coded. They aren't coded. These are just characters from my homeworld is all. Keeps nosy people from seeing my work before it's done. He gave both women a pointed look, and they didn't meet his eyes. Anyway, I promise I'll tell you both if it works. But I'm worried more and more it will be impossible. Then why have you been spending almost every waking moment on it? She asked him. He put his notes on hold and looked her dead in the eyes. Because if it works, the results could be life-changing. Anyway, Falk, are you heading out soon? Mind if I walk with you? Toss some ideas around. Sure, you got me curious, boy, so why not? I only rushed here anyway to make sure you were all safe, so I wouldn't mind turning in soon. Excellent, then let's head out. Thera, Sonia, I'll be back in a bit. All right? Be careful out there, Sonia said as she waved them off. And Thera gave a much briefer goodbye, clearly unhappy that Ben was keeping this a secret from her. Hearing the exchange brought a different question to Falk's mind, though. Is the boy just living with them now? Aren't you all better by now? Are you still staying with them? Falk asked, deciding not to hide his curiosity. Oh yeah, Sonia was still worried about Thera, so she asked me to stay around, and Thera's still spending a lot of time inside. After all, the cloak I made doesn't let any light through, so I need to lead her around if she wants to go out at all. I'm just making sure she has some company. Falk smiled at his apprentice. Good lad. Now why don't you tell me what you're working on that's keeping you so busy? The sooner you get it done, the sooner Thera will be a bit happier with you, I imagine. Right? I think I may have figured out an easier way to restrain Thera's charm magic, he said casually, dropping a surprise on par with hearing the town had been attacked. Falk stopped in his tracks. Boy, I've said before that there's only a handful of ways to deal with passive magics, but that's not from lack of trying. Over a dozen races have some sort of passive effects they need to deal with if they want to interact with the larger world, and you're saying you figured out a method in the few weeks I was gone. I maybe figured out a method, Ben clarified. Unfortunately, it's proven impossible to test given the size of the enchantment. I would need to make breaks literally every single material I've tried it on. And try he did. Ben was more than a little worried about what his teacher would say when he saw some of the supplies he took and ultimately broke, but it was still less than he would have used to make Thera's staves in that time, so hopefully he would get a pass. Falk, for his part, was at a loss. No wonder he wasn't telling the other two about this. No need to raise their hopes about something that was probably impossible. Still, if on the off chance it would work, he would do everything he could to help. All right, boy. Tell me how you're planning on doing it. My enchantment's still going to be better than yours. I should be able to bind it to a weaker material. But Ben only shook his head. It won't work. To do what I'm thinking, you'd need to be able to feel Thera's ambient mana. Maybe there's other skills that would make it possible, but I only know for sure that I can do it with Connect. If I can't make the enchantment smaller, then I'll have to wait until my skill levels increase. Not to mention that since it's an enchantment, Thera would have to be able to power it, which means making it robust enough that it could withstand her power, which means making the enchantment even bigger. If I had thought of this earlier, I would have changed my job to enchanter instead of craftsman. Maybe that would have helped. He spoke while staring up at the sky, filled with exasperation. His teacher's thoughts were in turmoil. He knew Ben was the only holder of this skill at the moment, and there was plenty of precedent for new skills being able to change the world. Wouldn't it be worth taking a little risk to see? At worst, he could probably get Thera's parents to replace anything they used. They got to Falk's residence, and Ben was about to turn away for the night, but his teacher stopped him. Hold on a moment. What sort of item were you looking at using to hold the enchantment? I figured an arm brace would be good. While making something like a shirt may work a little better, any material I could conceivably make it out of would be far too rigid and uncomfortable for practical everyday use. A decent choice. Hold on for a minute. I'll be right back. His teacher walked into his home for a few minutes before coming back and handing Ben a small lump of metal and a stone. What is this? Silver and quartz, he asked. Try mithril and a white mana crystal. Ben almost dropped the items when his teacher told him that. Jesus, Falk. I knew you were holding out on me, but I didn't think you'd have magic materials just laying around your house. From what he knew, there were 9 magic materials that existed, 7 metals and 2 crystals, and even if the ones currently in his hands were 2 of the most common of the 9, Falk had handed them over like it was nothing. When you have things like this, it's better to keep them away from prying eyes. Even if those aren't too rare comparatively at least, and the costs have been going down over the last few decades, I'm still not going to just let anyone see them. Especially not an apprentice who may be tempted to use them for a staff that's destined to explode. Well, you don't have to worry about that. I don't actually think I'm comfortable using these at all. These would be the most valuable materials I've ever worked with. You have nothing to worry about. The crystal's already properly set, so you don't need to do much with it. Just attach it to whatever you make with the mithril along the rim. Ben took a closer look and saw that there was in fact a channel of mithril carved along the inside of the stone, but he still couldn't help but worry. God, I don't know, Falk. Do you think you could put the armband together? I only need to apply the enchantment after all. His teacher put a large hand on his shoulder and tried to ease his mind. Boy, listen up. If you intend to be a great craftsman, then you'll have to get used to handling materials like this eventually. I may be starting you a bit earlier than most, but I have the utmost faith in your abilities. Besides that, I basically got no sleep on the entire trip back, so I'm turning in. Just do your best. Ben was still staring at the items in his hands, but he had to admit, even if he was nervous, he wanted to give it a go. All right, Falk, in that case I'll go for it. Stop by Sonia's in the morning and we'll see how it goes. Wait, I didn't mean you have to work at it immediately, his teacher said. No time like the present. Anyway, have a good night. All right, boy, I'll be by in the morning. You better wow me. Ben went into the shop and started up the forge for the first time in weeks, having spent a lot of time either working on the cloak, hanging with Thera, or after the events with Roan refining his idea, trying to force a chance of success into it through sheer power of will. Now it felt good to be back, and his excitement was palpable. A few books on different materials were kept on one of the nearby shelves as a reference, but Ben didn't need to check on what to do. He'd already read them over multiple times. Mithril was a softer metal, better as a core in many of the items it was used in, if not just made into an alloy, but it had the excellent property of being able to absorb surrounding mana to activate and sustain any enchantments that were placed on it, or as a means to help the wearer of anything mithril regenerate their magic slightly faster. It was prized by adventurers for that particular property, but with a war coming, possibly as soon as 2 years off by this point, many nations were buying up all they could to use for their armies, making it harder for a common person to get a hold of it unless you could get in contact with a supplier. Ben had an inkling of how Falk managed it, but it wasn't immediately important. To do what he wanted, he would need a bit more material than what he had, so first he worked to make an alloy with it and copper, a metal that wouldn't dampen the mithril's absorptive effects. He heated up the forge before turning it off. The magics used to power it could affect the metal as it was being shaped, and once he was sure all of the mana dispersed, he put both metals inside to heat up as much as they could before he took it out and started to combine them, hammering and folding together repeatedly and reheating as necessary, having to repeat the process of turning the forge on, letting the mana dissipate, heating, and holding repeatedly until he was confident the materials were properly blended. After that, it became a matter of shaping his new composite metal, meaning repeating the same process again and again as he worked on it until it had the shape he wanted, that of a thin wire, about 1/4 centimeter in diameter. With his work at the forge done, he coiled up the wire and made his way back to the house to continue the process there. When he opened the door and went to the living room, he found Sonia and Thera playing a game of Lomage when he greeted them. "Done your secret meeting with Uncle?" Thera asked, some jealousy plain in her voice. Ben felt pretty bad about it. He knew she was bothered by the fact he refused to share what he'd been working on, which led him to making a snap decision. "Yep, I'm hoping to work on it throughout the night, so if it goes well, it will be done tomorrow. If it doesn't, then either I'm wrong and it's impossible or my skills aren't good enough yet. Either way, I'll at least let you know what I was trying." "Really?" Her eyes lit up and she let out a bit more excitement than she probably meant to. "Then why not just tell us now, though?" He gave a little shake of his head. "I feel like that would only get my own hopes up. If this fails, then I can accept it and move on." "All right, fine. So when will it be done?" "I'll probably have to work through the night. Speaking of, I'll need to borrow your arm. Okay. Which one? Your choice, he replied, and she held out her left for him. And is this going to take long? Oh, absolutely. And with that he got to work. He was going to make her an arm brace with a technique known as wire wrapping, which involved cutting lengths of the wire and through a process of wrapping, tying, bending, and braiding, produced an intricate piece that would hold itself together. The main thing was shaping it in a way that would both hold comfortably to her arm, as well as being something she could slide on and off with enough ease should the need arise. Of course, aside from that, it was going to be something she would have to wear all of the time. It would also have to be aesthetic, so he did his best to find a good balance between form and function. He took all the measurements he needed to as he went, used some wire cutters he brought from the shop, and let his artistic vision take over, moving every wire as he thought would be the most aesthetically pleasing, losing himself in the act of assembly. He hadn't paid much mind to the time itself, and before he knew it, it was time to add the mana crystal. He had left a spot open in the top center, where the wires would be able to wrap around the mithril inlay to anchor it in place, and finally, he was done. A part of him actually wished it had taken a bit longer. It was a more enjoyable art form than he had expected, but he could always dabble with it more in the future, and it seemed that Thera was getting tired. She'd stopped supporting her arm long ago, instead just resting it on him as he worked. When he let go, she turned to him. Are you finally done? Well, at least the first part. I'll have to harden the metal later so it holds its shape, but I should be able to enchant it first. So what do you think? She stretched her arm out in front of her to give herself and Sonia a look. It's beautiful, she admitted, though I'd still really like to know what it's for. Sonia could only gasp at first, though. Ben, is that what I think it is? That depends, he said with a cheeky grin. Are you talking about the mana crystal in the center? Or the mithril wire? They both put on a stunned look when he said that. Well, I just meant the crystal, but you used mithril as well? There's so much. What could you possibly be using this for? Well, it's a 50% mithril alloy, so it's not quite as much as it looks. But if I can't make my enchantment work on this, then it's going to be impossible. Ben, what could you possibly be trying to enchant on this? I'm pretty sure fractions of the quantity you used are added to most weapons or armors to enhance their magical effects. Again, I'll tell you in the morning. Anyway, now all that's left to do is enchant it. Is it going to take long? Thera asked. I would really like to get to bed soon. It will probably be a while, but I think you can sleep while I do it. You don't need to connect to me for it? Then what were you doing on all of your previous attempts? No, I'll definitely need to be connected, but I'm pretty sure you can be asleep for it. It shouldn't cause any issue. Wait now, hold on. She spoke with surprise. That means you'd be in my room watching me sleep for how long? Honestly, probably a while, but it's not like I'll be watching you sleep or anything. I'll be focusing on my enchantment. Thera looked back and forth between Ben and Sonia, Ben showing a serious face, and Sonia trying not to giggle too hard from the exchange. Ah, Thera, your mother and I always wondered what sort of man you'd first spend the night with. Please wonder something else. She responded with a shout before turning back to Ben. Okay, fine. Just don't do anything weird, or stare at me too much, or break any of my clothing with your enchantments, or do anything other than work on your project. Also, my door's staying open. Yes, ma'am, no worries. I am a picture of responsibility. Thera gave him a doubtful look but didn't argue, instead getting up. Fine. I'm going to change. I guess come in whenever you want to start. He got up to follow her, but she yelled back. I meant after I'm done changing. My bad. So he sat back down with Sonia, who was still stifling her giggles. I have to say, Ben, Thera's been a lot more expressive with you around. Is that a good thing? He wasn't really sure where this was going. It is, she quickly affirmed. Because of her constitution, even other succubi children often didn't have the necessary resistances to stay around her. So it warms my heart to see her have a proper friend, even luckier that it happens to be a nice man around her own age. Her smile seemed to be carrying certain implications behind it, which Ben elected to ignore. And I'm happy to have made a friend my age in this world as well. The first few months in this town, my only conversation partners were Falk and Myriad, so it's nice to have her company. It's still downright strange that you could consider a god a casual conversation partner, But I guess if you'll put her on the same level then you're at least valuing her properly, she mused. Anyway, I'm sure she's all sorted. You should go in while she's awake. It wouldn't be a good look to sneak in while she's sleeping. Right? He thankfully wasn't that dense. Well, I'll see you in the morning then, Sonia. With goodnights exchanged, he grabbed a stool and headed over to Thera's room. The door was open, so he let himself in. Thera was laying in bed, her blanket covering most of her face, so only her eyes were peeking out, with a bit of a flush barely visible beneath them. She left her arm with the brace out over her sheets, and now Ben had to admit to himself that this was definitely a weird situation to be in. Still, he tried to calm his thoughts, focusing on the task at hand, trying to steady his mind so it wouldn't disturb her rest. He put the stool down beside her and took her hand in his own, while placing his other one on the brace. All right, just try and relax, Thera. I'll try and make sure my thoughts and emotions don't distract you while you sleep. I'm perfectly relaxed. You just make sure you don't do anything weird. Promise. And with that he connected. He could immediately tell that Thera was suffering through a range of emotions at the moment. Awkwardness, shyness, general embarrassment, and other emotional discomfort. He guessed it made sense. Just because they were friends didn't mean that she would be comfortable with a man sitting by her bedside throughout the night, so he tried to be as relaxed as possible to hopefully help her calm down. Then got to work. The first thing he did was secure his enchantment to the armband. Then he began to pull and stretch it out. He was trying to apply two different techniques he was aware of, braiding his enchantments, to make it sturdier and ultimately easier to make than trying to form a giant layer all at once, as well as another he'd only learned the practical use for recently, which caused the enchantment to cling to a person, much in the way Falk protected himself from Thera's magic with a powerful dark resistance necklace. Ben, however, wouldn't be making it cling to her body though, he would be attaching it to her mana itself. Ideally, the high level of resistance would act as a sort of filter for her mana, stripping it of the affinity that was mixed in, but he'd first need to overcome the greatest obstacle, the near-overwhelming size of Thera's mana. It was so large that he had to be careful with his own mana as he worked, making sure to work at a slow enough pace that his mana recovery could keep up. With that, a night full of patient working began. With great care he wrapped his mana around her own, making the thinnest strand of enchantment he thought he could get away with, and after who could say how long started to thread it through itself. One of the biggest hurdles to the entire endeavor was figuring out how exactly he was going to braid it. He'd thought of a couple interesting solutions, but had to dismiss them out of hand, just from the size of her mana alone. After weeks of deliberation and discussing options with Myriad, they had chosen to settle on something that would resemble a monkey's fist knot. He'd made a couple for fun when he was younger and practiced with string to be sure he still knew the proper technique for it. It just so happened that the scale was on a whole other level. As the hours ticked by he soldiered on, correcting any minor mistake he made along the way with a level of patience he could only muster when using his focus skill, and eventually he finished. Now all that mattered was if it would work. Finally, he quietly sighed and prepared to slink off for the night. He most certainly wasn't expecting a reply to his casual thought, but one came anyway. That's what I want to say, Thera spoke, laying down still but eyes clearly open. Oh, sorry, Thera. Did I keep you up? No, I went to sleep fine eventually. I've been awake for over an hour. It's morning, Ben. He looked to her window and found that though the curtains were closed, there was indeed light leaking through them, gently filling the room. Wow, that took a lot longer than I thought it would, he said offhandedly. I'll say, at least you were lost in your own little world. I was stuck doing nothing the entire time, dealing with those two peering in on occasion and laughing. She sat up and Ben did his best to not pay too close attention to the pajamas she wore, something resembling a cotton nightgown, as she gestured to the doorway with her head. He turned to look and found both Falk and Sonia grinning. So how did that go, lad? His teacher asked him. I applied the enchantment. All that's left to do is see if it works. Should we be asking a guard again? No need. I whipped something up quick before coming here. I'll just need you to apply the enchantments. He pulled out a stick with 10 different pegs in it. When Sonia saw it, her eyes widened and she spoke out. Wait, Falk, isn't that Dash? Why don't we let the boy save the reveal? Gotta see if it works first anyway. His teacher interrupted her. Now boy, let's leave the house for a minute, and I'll tell you how to finish this. Okay? Sure, can do, he said, not really understanding the point but obeying his teacher anyway. They went outside and walked for a minute away from the house when Falk handed the stick to him. So what is this anyway? Ben asked. A simple way to measure passive magics. The only issue is you need someone with high enough resistances to set it up. Now link your dark resistance with the bind spell and attach each peg to the base, increasing each time. Start at 4 and end at 40. Ben followed his instructions and did as he was told, quickly applying the enchantments, and then started to head back to the house and Thera's room. One by one the pegs began to fall as they got closer, making him realize how it worked while at the same time crushing his spirit. Falk, however, was staring at it intensely as they moved back to the waiting Thera and Sonia, eventually making it back to the room. Sorry to have wasted your night, Thera. It looks like this was a bust, he told them, filled with disappointment. She was going to ask what it was supposed to do anyway since she still wasn't in the loop, when his teacher stopped him. Not so fast, boy. Hand Thera that and let's see what happens. There was no harm, so he did as he was told and walked across the room to hand it to her. Of the remaining 4 standing pegs, 1 fell as he got closer, leaving only 3 remaining upright as Thera took the device. As she grabbed onto it, 2 more fell, leaving only 1 remaining. See, waste of time. Ben's thoughts turned to how good it would feel to waste some money on a street stall for some food right now when Falk grabbed him to get his attention. Boy, this is important. Did you only make the last peg reach 40? Yeah, of course, I wouldn't mess up on the only practical thing I can enchant. Given that his max darkness resistance was 85 and taking into account that he'd leveled up, he could now enchant up to 51. His teacher's eyes light up hearing that. Then you did it. Infinite Hells, boy, you created a new way to block out passive magics. What? Thera yelled, looking down at her arm. Falk, don't raise her hopes like that. Thera, I'm sorry, that was my goal, but it was a failure. It's nothing to be excited about. Nothing to be excited about yet, his teacher clarified. Boy, anything she touches needs just over 40 resistance. If the last peg isn't coming down, that means you've successfully blocked some of her magic. All that's left to do is experiment. First, we should remove the enchantments on that to do both the full range between the 26 and 30 pegs, as well as between the 36 and the 40 pegs. After that, do you think you could make another? I mean, sure, my enchanting went up after doing the first one, so hopefully I could make it a little more powerful if it really did work, though it will take hours. Hearing his teacher's enthusiasm brought back some of his own hope. Maybe his little project wasn't as much of a write-off as he initially thought. You told me you were wrapping it around the person's mana, right? In that case, I would say to do it on someone with significantly less to save time. At that, he turned to Sonia. Wait, you have charm as well? But I've seen you walk around town without a cloak. She gave him a brief explanation. When you get to level 6 in charm magic, it's possible to suppress its effects. Unfortunately, until that point its effects only become worse, so it wasn't an option for Thera. I've spent a few decades myself to get to that point. I actually don't suppress it if I'm at home though, you just can't tell. So they had someone else to test on. Perfect. Alright, if I'm going to do this, I'll need a medium to bind it to. Falk, can you run and whip up an armband in the shop? If her mana is significantly smaller than Thera's, I doubt I'll need more mithril. In the meantime, I'll redo the resistances. Can do, boy. I'll be right back. With that, his teacher ran off and Ben started to remove the enchantments on the tool, while Thera was busy examining the brace around her arm. So this was your secret project the entire time? Sonia asked as she walked up to him. Why wouldn't you just say this was what you were working on? I just didn't want to raise anyone's expectations or hopes on something that probably wouldn't work. Hell, as far as I'm concerned, it basically didn't work. I thought that applying an equal level of resistance would counteract the magic since that's how it seems to work for living things, but it looks like I barely got a fraction of that. He wanted to wallow in self-pity over his perceived failure, but that wouldn't make things any better. Okay, give me a minute, I need to reapply the enchantments outside, so they don't just break immediately. He walked out, then came back after the tool was properly set up, and watched for any falling pegs as he went back. Just one. Just a single peg fell, meaning he brought her effects down to 27 at a distance. It wasn't much, but it was something, especially if he could improve it some more. His excitement started to rise again despite himself, and he handed the device to Thera. Again, only one fell. For both the effect at a distance and her effect on contact, he had been able to lower both by 3. It wasn't what he'd hoped for when he first started to set this up, but it showed his idea wasn't completely without merit. As he ran through possibilities where he could try to improve the design in his mind, Falk came back with a variety of braces, ranging from the same size as Thera's to just a couple inches long. All right, boy. Think you could apply the same enchantment to all of these for Sonia to try? Wait, Falk, she interrupted. Won't this take days? Besides, I need to be leaving for the clinic in a couple hours. It won't take that long, and it doesn't have to be all of them at once, Ben explained. The reason it took so long with Thera was due to the size of her magic. I don't know how much you have, but as long as it isn't on a similar scale, it should be quicker. Here, let's grab a seat in the kitchen. If it takes too long, we can just stop and you can head out. They all moved to the kitchen, everyone excited to see what the result would be, and Ben got to work. He connected with Sonia for the first time, feeling excitement coming off of her in waves, but he ignored that and instead focused on making the enchantment, first attempting it on the biggest brace that Falk brought. Even if the time was flying by as he worked, Ben could tell there was no comparing how long it had taken to make Thera's to Sonia's. Her magic was just that much smaller and more manageable. Before he knew it, he had her mana wrapped with his enchantment, and he was done. He broke off the connection and looked at the faces around him, all looking on with surprise. What's with the looks? It was his teacher who took it upon himself to answer. Ben, that couldn't have taken more than 30 minutes. Yeah, that tracks, he responded nonchalantly. Sonia has significantly less mana leaking from her than Thera after all. I don't think you're thinking of the implications right now, but fine. Thera, go put on your cloak so Ben can set up the passimeter, would you? And Ben just set it up from 10 to 14 and 20 to 24. Would you? They both did as they were instructed, though Thera was disappointed that she wouldn't be able to see the results for herself, and Ben set up the device. Sonia, could you release your charm? Let's see if there's any difference. Falk. I had stopped using it when Ben started on his enchantment. I didn't know if it would interfere at all, she told him, looking at the passimeter in Ben's hand. That was probably a good call actually, but... He was eyeing the tool himself, not a single peg had fallen. Ben handed it to her. Sonia grabbed onto it, and they all stared in silence. All except Thera, that is. Can someone tell me what's happening? I still can't see anything. None of the pegs have fallen. Not even in the 10 to 14 range, Falk answered, looking to Ben. Boy, Sonia's charm is in the upper middle range of what succubi have, and you've completely blocked it. Okay, that's cool and all, but why won't it work for Thera then? That was the main reason he tried to make it after all. He wanted it to work out as well, though hearing this only made Falk sigh. The sheer scale of her mana probably causes it to leak through the enchantment. Boy, I get you haven't met your goal, but you really need to look at the broader implications of this. I told you before that tools that block passive magics are either expensive or take too long to make right. Yours just solved both issues. Alright, but mine has a completely different issue. I'm currently the only one with the connect skill. We would need others to get it as well as enchanting for it to have a real impact. Don't worry about that for now. There's a lot of other things we'll need to do first before we even begin to worry about that. Let's see. First, you said your enchanting level went up, right? You have to remove the enchantment you put on Thera's brace and try to reapply it. After that, I'm going to have to get in touch with some people and set up some meetings, but if we're going to try that, I'll have to finish Thera's new cloak. I should be able to get that done in around 5 days. Of course, we'll need to see if you could apply the same level of enchantment to some of the smaller braces and bracelets as well. Am I forgetting anything? Falk? What are you all talking about? Ben asked, unsure what to do about all of his teacher's mutterings. Don't worry about it, boy. For now, just focus on removing Thera's enchantment and starting a new one. The best you can too. We need to see how leveling up impacted your ability to make hers. Okay, sounds good. But there's one important thing I have to do first. What could you possibly need to do that would trump this? Sleep. I've been awake for almost a whole day. Staying up for another 10 or 12 hours to do that enchantment again is way too much. When he woke up, Ben was almost immediately put back to work. He tested to see the limits of how small of a brace he could make to hold the enchantment, finding that one about half the length of Sonia's forearm would work, though that would probably vary depending on the material used to make it. Once that was done, he removed the enchantment he'd made for Thera, then spent another night remaking it while she slept, much to her discomfort. After that, it seemed with his level up, they were able to lower her passive magic effects to 24 at a distance and 34 on contact, both far better than nothing, but still outside the range a majority of people could resist. Still, it showed that as long as he continued to level up, he could potentially keep getting her magic effects lower, until a point that it would be more manageable. It would just take time and patience. After all of that was done, he thought he could finally get some rest for the day and went back to sleep, only for Falk to shake him awake around noon. Ah! Falk, not so close. Seeing what looked like a large gorilla right in front of him as he opened his eyes wasn't the nicest way for anyone to wake up. But the adrenaline flowing through him meant he wasn't getting back to sleep. What do you want? I got us an emergency appointment set up, his teacher said without elaboration. Get dressed and come with me. He didn't fight his teacher on it and got himself sorted, but when they left the house and said goodbye to Thera, he wanted a couple answers. So what's so important that you couldn't let me sleep? Boy, you really need to think about the magnitude of your discovery here. We're going to send an official patent with the Craftsman's Guild. We have one of those in town? He was sure he had a pretty good idea of what was around at this point, and he felt like he would have noticed something so relevant to his occupation. Not a dedicated one, it's at the Adventurers Guild. In smaller towns, there's usually just one building for the four main guilds, and since smaller towns are likely on the fringes with a lot of adventurers and only a few craftsmen, merchant, or mages that would need guild services, that means they typically end up as adventurers' guilds first and foremost. Of course, now we'll be getting you registered as an official craftsman. But that's not the main point of the visit. Before Ben could ask more about the main point, though, they had arrived and were welcomed by his favorite guild employee. Good afternoon, Ben. Oh, and Fox with you, it's been a while, Ankh said with cheer to them, a greeting his teacher returned. Afternoon, Ankh, is Cecily available? I set up an appointment the other day. Absolutely. She's just upstairs. Go on ahead. Falk dragged Ben along, not giving him any time to ask any of the questions floating through his mind, bringing him upstairs and walking into a room to find someone Ben recognized behind a desk. The guild master. You could at least knock, she said, looking up from some papers to see who had barged in. Bah, you knew I was coming, it's fine. Sides, this is important. It better be if you're making me act in an official capacity for the Craftsman's Guild. When you insisted on this meeting, I had to review a ton of procedural documents on how I'm actually supposed to fill the role. You're not filling me with a bunch of confidence here, Cecily, his teacher told her, but she waved off his concerns. It's fine, but there's only about a dozen registered members in the town. They've never needed to use the guild for more than ordering supplies and books through. Well, I'm sure you'll be able to help me out. I hear you met my apprentice. Ben gave a friendly nod, not sure what he was supposed to be doing at the moment as Cecily gave him an appraising look. Indeed, the boy that faced a horde of monsters and has apparently been hunting solo since he joined the guild. It was more Thera going against all the monsters. I was just support. Support is important, unless you can honestly tell me she could have faced all of those beasts without you there. He stayed silent. He knew that if he wasn't around and Thera tried to do what they had accomplished alone, her staff probably would have broken. But he didn't want to talk up his own involvement in the event. He really felt he had only provided some help. The guild master looked at him a little longer before turning back to Falk. So what was so important you set up an emergency meeting, Falk? If it was any of the other craftsmen in town, I wouldn't have cleared my schedule. We need to get my apprentice registered. He's discovered something big, and I want to get the patent for it in his name as soon as possible. A patent? She asked with a raise of an eyebrow. Don't get me wrong. It's impressive that a young guy like him could manage it, but why would that be so important? He's found a cheap and easy way to inhibit passive magics. She took a second to process what was said, but when she did, her eyes widened. Oh damn, this is going to be a lot of paperwork for me. Isn't it? Yes, Falk confirmed. Have a pen ready. Boy, outline to her exactly how you went about this. Don't spare any detail, no matter how insignificant. Ben did as his teacher asked, explaining his entire process in as much detail as he could, including his levels in each skill he used at the time to make it possible, as well as the fact that one of the skills needed to be granted by a particular god. Once that was done, Cecily addressed another matter. All right, I'll have this sent off as fast as possible. Give me your card for now, and I'll register you as a member of the Craftsman's Guild. There are some fees, but they're small and will be removed automatically, so it isn't much to worry about as long as you have a steady stream of income, but we can worry about that later. For now, what's most important is if you want to register your name on the public documents as the creator of the technique, or if you want to remain anonymous. Well, what difference does it make? The biggest difference is just the sheer fame. If the world is aware you've made this, then a lot of countries are going to try and recruit you. Of course, this has positives and negatives in itself. If a country recruits you, then on the plus side, they'll start to offer you things like supplies, a fully funded shop, maybe even staff to work under, not to mention a large and stable source of pay. On the negative, though, anything you create that you'd want to patent, they would get a large cut of all the profits for funding your work. As well, you would most likely have to prioritize their work over any other. On the other hand, though, if you were to stay anonymous, your life wouldn't change in any noticeable way, except of course for any money you would make through your patents, which would be deposited in your card automatically by the guild. And how exactly do I make money from any of this anyway? Anytime a craftsman wants to make what you've patented to sell, they'd have to give 10% of their profit from the sale to you. This leaves the sell price of the item itself up to the individual craftsman, of course, but nobody wants to earn less money. You can be reasonably sure you'll be getting a good deal. There is, of course, the potential for people to simply give away items they've made, but as long as they aren't profiting, that is completely legal. As well, if a kingdom or nation were to have any commissioned from their personal craftsmen, then they would still have to pay a set amount towards you for the designs. This seems a lot more complicated than I expected. The gods who rule over crafting are very strict on the idea that people should be properly compensated for their works. As such, the head branch of the guild is quick to shut down anyone breaking the rules and profiting off of others' inventions and discoveries. Of course, this protection only lasts for 100 years, so depending on your race's lifespan, it may not seem like enough, but it's important to eventually let other craftsmen get their hands on them without having to worry about losses. Okay, cool. And if I choose to remain anonymous, can I change that at any time? Maybe not any time, you'd have to set up a meeting with a proper branch head, but it's not too difficult of a process. All right then, I'll remain anonymous for now. As much as he wanted to show himself off to the various countries of the world and have them wither with regret over not taking him when they had the chance, if they started to show up now to offer him deals, it would honestly just sound like a pain in the ass. Not something he currently wanted, though maybe a bit farther in the future when he had a better idea of what to do in the world. A decent choice for now. Of course, if you're going to start selling them, then people will be able to figure out who the person making them is pretty quickly if they want to. No need to worry about that, his teacher interrupted. I've got a solution for him, so it should be fine. All right, if you say so, she said a bit dubiously. In the meantime, it would be best to research all of the limits you can figure out to the enchantment and file a detailed report. As promising as this looks, the findings are still pretty initial, and it doesn't sound like this skill comes from a very popular god. Until any researchers figure out how to properly awaken it without converting, the number of people who will be able to make use of it will be pretty small. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for your time, Cecily. As I'm sure you can imagine, we still have a lot to do, so we'll be heading out. With that, they left the guild and Falk turned to Ben. Boy, pack a bag and do whatever you need to get done in the next couple days. I'm gonna have to send you off for a while. What? Why? You're going to Analia. The next few days passed in a blur. Ben focused on figuring out what else he should test for his enchantment, as well as taking Falk's recommendations as his teacher rushed to finish a proper cloak for Thera. Apparently he was being sent off to her homeland, and since she had no real responsibilities as an adventurer, she was able to pack up and leave without worry, having been asked to go with him by Falk to look after him in the foreign nation. Not that she had any problem with it, After being cooped up for so long, it felt nice to be able to leave on a trip and get the chance to visit her parents. Ben didn't know how long he would be gone, though Fox said to expect it to take a month or two. So he left the place he was renting and asked Sonia to store his few possessions while he was away to save some money. All that was left were goodbyes before heading off. "It's going to be all right. Sure, I may be gone for a couple of months, but you have nothing to worry about." Ben spoke calmly, though he couldn't hide the sadness in his voice. "Hey now, I'm going to miss you too, but you know you can't come with me. It would be too difficult. Sonia's here for you at least. I know you two don't really talk, but she'll take good care of you. I promise I'll spend all sorts of time with you when I'm back, so try not to be too lonely. Okay, buddy? Ben, stop talking to your plant and let's go already," Thera said to him as she watched his overly dramatic exchange with his houseplant Frederick. "I'm just trying to calm him down. He's already feeling lonely. Has been ever since I told him I was leaving." Thera let out a long sigh. With Ben having lived with her for a few weeks at this point, she was used to the sight of the young man talking with it to practice his connect skill, but it still didn't paint a very emotional picture. Thankfully, as he prepared for another extended goodbye with it, Sonia stepped in. "I promise I'll take good care of Frederick for you, Ben. Now, in the meantime, do you have everything? One of you packed the painting, right?" "I have it," Thera said. In the time they had waited for Falk to return, Ben lived up to his promise to paint a couple portraits of them together, and one was being sent off as a gift to her parents. "All right, excellent. Your mother's going to be so jealous that your first painting was with me. I can't imagine how many she'll try to commission from Ben." Thera slipped her head into her hands. "I don't want to think about it. Both of you be good," Fox spoke up. "Thera, send my regards to your folks. And boy, don't let her parents rope you into anything crazy. Remember what I told you. How will I know if it's crazy or not?" He wasn't exactly super familiar with succubus customs. His teacher gave it a moment's thought before giving up. "Good point. Thera, don't let him be roped into anything crazy. I'll try my best." With their goodbyes done, they headed to a wagon on its way out to Vanissil, the closest city to Stonewall with a gate. Sonia turned to Falk as they watched the wagon go off, with her niece and Ben inside. "So he never ended up asking?" Color me shocked. "Ha, the boy was probably too busy to give it any thought. It's a shame though. I can't wait to see what his reaction will be when he comes back and asks." She looked down at the armband she was currently wearing with appreciation. Still, a plain copper armband should be lower common, right? Could an enchantment really bring it up to lower uncommon? "Absolutely, for a good enough one, but that's nothing," Fox said while he received a questioning look. "Mithril already puts items into the lower uncommon range, so for Thera's it would make sense if her band was there too. But spending 10 straight hours making the enchantment was enough to get it squarely in the upper uncommon range." Fox grinned at Sonia's visible shock. He always thought taking an apprentice would be boring, but it looked like there was a lot more excitement to it than he would have guessed. "Wow! There's a lot more than I expected," Ben said when they arrived in the city. It had been a long ride, taking almost a week to get there, but it had been peaceful, and now that he was inside the city, he had a sudden and intense desire to explore. "It's a typical gate city, nothing to be too excited about," Thera responded with mild indifference. "Well, the only places I've been to are a communal church and Stonewall. I would say this is pretty fantastic. It's not like there's a rush. Let's take a look around." He immediately pulled Thera along as he started to wander around. There was a much greater selection of races around than at the town he was currently calling home, which meant more varieties in architecture and more foods to try, not to mention the constant crowd that filled the streets as people went to travel to or from distant lands. He was grabbing a snack from a street vendor before he knew it and started poking his head into various shops around, especially any that catered to his interests, as Thera was dragged by his whims. "That's the fourth smith you dragged me to. Is this really necessary? I'm just curious on how Fox stuff stacks up. I know he's the best in Stonewall, but I didn't think he would still be so much better than anyone in a city like this too," he said quietly to try and avoid offending the shopkeeper. "I know Uncle is excellent at what he does, but is there really that much of a difference?" she asked curiously as she cast her eyes around the store they were currently in. It all looked the same to her. Absolutely. Take a careful look at some of the blades. You can make out some minor imperfections that I've never seen on any of his works. Honestly, I always thought Falk undercharged for his stuff, but I was never positive until now. God, I need to get to level 9 crafting so I can actually see his items rankings. You do know that most people never get past level 5 in a given skill, right? It could take the rest of your life to make it that far. Ben could only shrug. Skills improve as long as you constantly push your limits, right? I just need to keep going at it and I'll get there. You're definitely going to burn yourself out. Though when she thought back on the single-minded determination and focus he got when working on a project he was passionate about, she had to admit to herself that maybe it wasn't so impossible. Heck, if he could keep his pace, he might even make it to the 3rd tier by the very end of his life. Plus, with the benefits of a god's blessing, he was probably more likely to reach his goal than an average person. As she took a second to think on how he devoted himself to his work to the point of blindness to everything else, he grabbed her hand and dragged her out of the store and into the next one to capture his attention. Oh look, an enchanter's shop. I gotta see this. They entered the shop as Ben pulled Thera along and immediately started to look at the various items and tools around, trying to work out what they could do and if he would need to buy any to play with. There wasn't a huge need to get anything now, of course. Analia would presumably have its own fair share of shops to explore while he was there, but he wouldn't want to miss anything fun when the shopkeeper approached. "Are you looking for anything in particular?" inquired a black-shelled biped, not what he would classify as a hominid type like him or Thera, but he didn't have a proper reference to compare them to. "Just hoping you could point us to something fun." The shopkeeper looked at his smiling face and the cloaked Thera before making his suggestion. "Well, I do have some anti-life magic rings in the back. I sure you both could dash." "Nope. No thank you, we're good." "Come on, Ben," Thera said, interrupting the shopkeeper and dragging him out the door. "Hey, what's the matter, Thera?" "I was curious about what he had." Thera took a deep breath and reminded herself that Ben was still reasonably new to the world, so he wasn't going to be aware of every item most people would consider common. "Ben, I'm fine to help you train your skill on occasion, and while I don't mind it too much if you drag me around somewhere, you have to keep in mind how that may look to others at times." "Huh? What do you mean? And what does that have to do with Dash?" "He was offering us birth control," she said, cutting him off to get this embarrassing conversation done as soon as possible. "They're enchanted with a life magic curse to prevent." "Well, you get the idea." She was extremely glad to have the hood at the moment to hide her expression. This was not a conversation she was expecting to have today, but at least Ben for his part seemed equally embarrassed, a red flush rising to his cheeks. "Ah, my bad. Sorry," he told her and let go of her hand. "It's fine, that shouldn't have been the first thing to come to the shopkeeper's mind either, but some races are just a little less concerned about these things. Anyway, do you think we can move on to the gate now?" "Sure, let's go." A giant metallic arch, about 20 meters across, stood planted in the ground as groups of people slowly trickled in and out of it to get to their destination. Ben could only stare in wonder. How had it been constructed? How long did it take to enchant a beast like that with the proper spells? He would love to get the chance to look at the designs for it and would have to ask Falk if the blueprints were publicly available or if they were some closely guarded secret. If it were possible, then he was getting his hands on them. "Okay, enough gawking. Let's go through already," Thera said as she dragged him past the arch to what lay beyond. Ben was hit with a strange sense of familiarity for a moment before he could figure out why. Aside from numerous people walking around and a ring of what must have been over 100 gates all leading to different locations, they were in an empty blue-gray void, with no distinction between where the ground ended and the sky began. It looked just like the divine realm of his god. "What is this place?" he asked aloud in wonder, not really expecting an answer but getting one anyway. "Unnerving, isn't it? I'm told the gods made this area for all the gates to link to instead of having one central location on the planet to keep any one group from being able to take control of the gate's center point. Try not to think too much about it. It will only freak you out." He felt like mentioning that he spent a couple nights of the week in a place just like this with his god would have only raised more questions, so instead he let Thera lead them to their destination. "Let's see. I think it's on the right," she muttered before dragging him along. As they walked, Ben took the time to look at the gates they passed. Seeing the top of each one was labeled with the name of whatever country or city was beyond it, as well as being able to peek through to whatever was on the other side. He caught glimpses of strange architectures, species he didn't have names for, and landscapes he'd never have imagined considering how his current home appeared. He wanted to keep stepping out into different areas and look at what was around, but they were already on their way to one new city. He'd just have to find another time to explore. Of course, that didn't stop him from peppering Thera with questions as they went. Hey, why are there guards outside of some of the gates? A few different reasons. Some nations don't want just anyone coming in or out, or there's places like the warfields and the untamed lands where you don't want someone walking in by mistake. Why, which did we pass? Oh. She turned her head back to look at the last guarded gate and saw exactly what it was. The Life Valley, huh? That's there to make sure nothing gets out. What's wrong with the Life Valley? It's a place where creatures with a high life affinity make their homes, including some with life affinity passive effects. Isn't that a good thing? I would love to be able to just walk into a land and start healing from injuries. Yeah, that sounds good in theory until you consider that the high concentration of life affinity mana makes everything grow out of control. How would you like to spend a day there and have mold spores instantly blossom across your flesh? Or whatever bacteria is present in you start to rapidly multiply and start consuming your body for resources while your body is healing itself at an accelerated rate to make up for it. So you have to either boost your food intake or waste away. Not to mention the way that anything that survives while constantly bathed in the life attribute tends to adapt to changes rapidly and in strange ways. If it wasn't for the death mountains surrounding it, there would probably be quite the issue if any of the monsters of the land got out. Ben felt a small shudder come over him. Well, that was some horrifying mental images. Thanks for that. I just want you to be aware of how dangerous some of these gates can be. You already look prepared to jump through a few. He gave her a cheeky grin and they continued on, moving by gates and eventually finding themselves in front of the one they were looking for. They took a step and were in Thera's homeland, Analia. Ben wasn't sure what he expected from the home nation of the succubi, but it wasn't this. Giant trees with crimson leaves that would put the redwoods of Earth to shame filled the city, and buildings like skyscrapers scattered around them. Metal poles jutted up around the Earth, and it took Ben a minute to figure out what they were for. But the city was far enough away from Vanasil that it was later in the day and night was falling. He could see a light gathering on the top of each pole and it clicked. Street lamps. This nation actually had street lighting set up. That fact alone left him more excited than the metropolis before him, and he couldn't wait to see what the city had to offer. While he was at the church, he had learned a bit about Analia. The land was rich in magical metals, and as a result, self-powering enchanted items were common. So common that apparently the metal could be used to keep lights running when it got dark instead of people just lighting a torch if the need arose. Until this point, Ben had been under the assumption that the world was an odd mix of medieval and what he would consider more modern technology, but he would need to reevaluate that thought. Sure, Stonewall wasn't super advanced, but enchanted items were common enough and replicated many of the creature comforts he was used to in his homeworld, and now he would get to see just what a magical society could accomplish if it had the resources for it. Wow, this is incredible, he said honestly, though Thera seemed uncomfortable. Yeah. It's been a while since I've been home. She shifted about awkwardly for a moment before walking off. Anyway, it's getting late. Let's meet my parents, and if you want, we can explore a bit tomorrow. Sounds good. I'm going to be jet-lagged for a few days from the looks of it. You're going to be what? Thera asked, confused. It means tired. Don't worry about it. They walked on in silence, Ben looking back and forth at all of the new sights around while Thera shuffled on, lost in thought for a while but knowing she needed to get what she needed to say out before they got to their location. Unfortunately, she put it off for far too long, and they were now standing in front of a large, gated building, constructed around one of the giant trees. Ben, before we head inside, there's something I should probably mention, she said while fidgeting about, not meeting his eyes. Curiously, and anticipation filled his face. Sure, what's up? He asked, trying to sound casual, but the excitement of the day was making it hard. It's about my parents' she started, before a voice cut her off. Lady Thera, a succubus guard who was standing by the building, called out to them. We've been expecting you, please write this way. Having been spotted before she could get a word out, she couldn't help but deflate. Oh, I really should have mentioned this earlier. Just try to relax. Don't worry, everything will be great, Ben told her with a level of confidence she envied. I really doubt that, but come on. The two of them followed the guard through the building, passing numerous rooms and hallways as they went, before entering two large, ornate doors and finding an expansive, well-decorated room within, and a single woman sitting on a throne at the other end. Approach, she said in a firm voice, and as they got closer Ben couldn't help but see her resemblance to Sonia, while Thera muttered under her breath, Gods, she's really doing this. Greetings, Thera, you seem well, the woman said with an air of dignity and command, which Thera greeted with a neutral, though slightly exasperated tone. Hello, mother, as do you. The woman turned to Ben and spoke up, Greetings, Ben. May the spirit of Analia ever guide you. Thera quickly turned to Ben to try and whisper at him. I'm sorry, I didn't think she would do this. Just repeat after me, Dash. But instead of listening to her, he took 2 steps forward, got on one knee, and placed one fist on the ground and the other over his heart before speaking up. Greeting to Pelania, Queen of the Succubi. May Analia's warmth fill you and her love protect you. I am humbled to be in your presence. If Thera's face was visible, everyone would have seen her mouth hanging open in shock. Queen Pelania, for her part, maintained her dignified air for another moment before slouching down and pouting. That's no fun, she said. Sonia said you didn't know. Don't tell me Thera worked up the will to tell you before you got here. Not really happy that you tried to pull this or that you were betting against me for that matter, mother, but I didn't. Ben, how did you know to do that? Hell, how long have you known about all this? She said, gesturing around her. He could only shrug and smile. If by all this you mean that your mom's the queen, I've known since before everything went down with Roan. I did tell you before that I received some lessons at the church about general world info and what they thought it would be good for a craftsman to know, right? You don't think they would fail to mention the fact that the price of magical metals has been plummeting for the last couple decades since the current queen was married to a great earth spirit. After you told me about your parents, it wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together. I was waiting for you to bring it up yourself, but since you never did, I asked Falk on how to make a good impression. He was feeling pretty pleased with himself, but he was rewarded with a firm punch to the arm. U.S. Do you know how worried I was about telling you? Relax. I'm not going to treat you any different because you're a princess. I'm not a princess. We're an elected matriarchy. Just because my mom has the role doesn't mean I'm taking over. She hit his arm again for good measure while he laughed. Okay. I'm sorry. He was happy to keep their little back and forth going on longer, but some laughter began to leak out from the throne, so he turned to give the royal some proper attention. I have to say it's nice to see you aren't as stiff as your teacher can be. Enough of the formalities. It's nice to finally meet you, Ben. I hear you've been treating my daughter well. Oh, he treats me very well. He felt bare arms wrap themselves around to his front and scratch at his chest, while Thera's head placed itself on his shoulders in a display he'd never expected from her. He felt blood rush to his face and didn't know how to react to the unexpected development. Thera, what are you doing, Dash? As he tried to ask, he was cut off by a staff smashing into her head and knocked her to the ground. That's not me. A still very cloaked Thera yelled angrily. Dad, what have I said about taking my form? The impostor gave a small tee-hee before their shape changed to that of an impressive man. 7 feet in height with marble skin like Thera's, thick golden hair and a beard to go with it, wearing a matching outfit with the queen, a dark green toga. Ben was able to be impressed with the transformation once his pulse slowed a bit from the shock, but Thera seemed emotionally drained by this point. Ben, let's just go back to Stonewall already. Uncle Falk definitely has other contacts you can work with. Oh, come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that. Your mom and I were just having some fun with your new friend, Thera's father said with a powerful laugh, though still rubbing his head. And there's still so much to talk about, Pelania said, pulling out a couple of letters. Falk and Sonia have mentioned most of it, I believe, but I'd like to hear the details from your own mouths for now. Thera, enough with the cloak, let me see my dear daughter's face. We paid a fortune to ensure everyone working here could have an amulet. It would be ridiculous not to put them to use. Sweetheart, would you be so kind? With a smile and a nod her father raised his hand slightly in the air, and from the ground emerged 4 stone chairs and a small table to go with it. Penelia and her husband both moved to take seats so Ben and Thera did the same, though Thera still seemed reluctant, and together they gave her parents a rundown on the past couple months. Their story wasn't long, but by the end of it her father looked like he was going to fly off in a rage, while his wife put a calming hand on his arm. Honey, why is this my first time hearing about this? No, that doesn't matter right now. If you don't mind, it looks like I have some business to attend to. It shouldn't be too hard to find where this man is located and deal with him. His voice was low but firm, and there was a small violent glint in his eyes as he spoke, but his wife was having none of it. This is exactly why it's your first time hearing this. They've already dealt with it by this point, and I didn't want you doing anything rash. What are you talking about? I'm always perfectly reasonable. Now if you'll excuse me, it sounds like he's a Zandalian, which means he must be from Flanlal. I'm just going to drop a small meteor nearby as a warning. Abris, with the invasion a few years away, I can't have you starting a side war now. Assuming we survive, that you can do what you want after, the Queen said to reason with him. Ben felt a small shiver going down his spine from the conversation when Thera leaned over to him and whispered into his ear. Don't worry too much. Mom just said that so Dad would take some time to cool down. He can be a little impulsive when he's mad. Don't make him mad. I hear you loud and clear. Anyway, Pelenia continued, as displeased as I am personally about everything that occurred, that's not why you're here. Falk tells me you've come up with a way to block passive magics and asked me if I would provide assistance to you. There are plenty of charlatans around who have used the same line to try and gather wealth and resources from me. But given the fact that it's my old friend saying it, I'm sure there's something more to it. I'm not sure how much Falk explained in his letter. There's been some success and some failure. I was able to restrain Sonia's magic without issue, but unfortunately I only slightly reduced the power of Thera's. I was told you might be able to help gather more subjects to test it on. The Queen gave a small nod. We've set up a number of appointments for you tomorrow. Starting in the morning, you'll have a variety of succubi and incubi, as well as diplomats with different passive effects from various embassies in the city coming by to be fitted with one of your enchantments. Okay. Wow, this is happening a bit faster than I expected. He couldn't keep the surprise from his face or voice. Thera's mother gave him an alluring smile. Assuming this works as well as I've been led to believe, then as Queen I have no choice but to support your work for the sake of my people. We have plenty of braces and armbands already made up for you, so you'll just need to set up the enchantment. Correct. That's right. Excellent. In that case, I'll have someone wake you in the morning. Expect to be occupied for the entire day. After we see the results, of course, we'll figure out where to go from there. In the meantime, let's have dinner brought in. Abris, be a dear and make the table a little bigger for when the other two come in, and let's move on to a more interesting topic of conversation. How long have you two been dating? Ben felt himself choke while Thera faced her mom's smile with an unimpressed look. He's just a friend, Mother. Don't make things weird. What a boring answer, but fine for now. In that case, has anything developed between Falk and Sonia yet? Also no. Penelia gave a long, exaggerated sigh. Master and apprentice both have such beautiful women in their lives, and neither do anything about it. Ben, I take back what I said about you not being as stiff as Falk. Ask out my daughter immediately. I want grandchildren. Infinite hells, Mom. Are you trying to make things as weird as you can? Thera asked with her head in her hands. Oh? Is the issue you don't like him? He seems to be a nice young man. Maybe a little plain-faced, but he has some nice muscles at least. The way Penelia looked him up and down, as if appraising a piece of meat, put him a little on edge, and he was getting the distinct impression that he wasn't going to have much luck dealing with either of Thera's parents' antics. That's not, I mean he's... Look, we're just friends. You know why I'm not looking for any romance, she said in a huff, already tired of being home. He could feel Thera getting more and more frustrated and decided to try to help her out, partially because he didn't know what to do in this conversation himself. Excuse me. Don't mind me bluntly changing the topic and all, but is something going on between Falk and Sonia? Oh, you didn't know? Penelia almost screamed in delight. Fawkes saved my sister's life years ago, and she's been smitten with him ever since. It's a shame he's so focused on work and can't even notice the beautiful woman by his side. Maybe I'll visit in a year or so and finally beat some sense into him. Is Fawkes even aware of her feelings? Ben had to ask. I know he considers her a good friend, but I've never really gotten the vibe from him. I don't think Uncle's ever been one for that sort of thing, Thera answered. I've never seen him with any partners around at least, though plenty of people aren't interested in other races if the resemblance between species is weak. And well, you know how his people look. Yeah, if the women of Fawkes' race look as gorilla-like as himself, Sonia probably has quite the hurdle to face. He quietly thought to himself. He had been taking it for granted since he currently made his home in a nation founded by mixed breeds. But the majority of people tended to reproduce within their own species. He's been single for as long as I've known him as well, Abris interjected. Of course I'm not one to judge. Romance wasn't even a part of my culture until I met my sweet Penelia. Oh, Abris, you gentlemen, you picked it up quite well, his wife told him, staring into his eyes as they got lost in their own little world. You know, every time I come home I'm reminded of how nice it is to no longer live here, Thera said when seeing their display. I think it's nice you have parents who still love each other after years of being together. It's sweet. Maybe, but it would be sweeter if they toned it down a little when other people are around. Sorry about all this. Don't sweat it. I'm a little shocked to see your personalities are so different though. We aren't that different, Penelia said once she was done flirting with her husband. It's just that she takes after Sonia a bit more. You and my sister are both so reserved all the time. That's why Fawkes hasn't noticed her yet. You need to be careful not to follow in her footsteps and take what you want in life. Well, I have plenty of time to figure out what it is I want, so there's no rush, Thera said dismissively, trying to keep the topic from returning to her own love life. You may be surprised. It seemed like the Queen wanted to say more, but a knock came from the door. Oh, that must be the other two. Please come in. What other two? Ben asked Thera, but she only shrugged. The doors opened and two figures walked in. One he recognized immediately as his former classmate Carly. But he couldn't help but ignore her as he stared at the other person to walk in. You're kidding me, he unintentionally spoke aloud. Yeah, I reacted pretty similarly too. Nice to see you, Ben, Carly said when she came in. Unsure of what was going on, Thera turned to him. What's the matter, Ben? Is everything okay? She seemed mildly concerned, but he needed a second to put his thoughts in order and process what he was seeing. He'd seen plenty of different races in this world, some that seemed familiar to various myths and some that seemed completely foreign to him, but he never expected this. Standing at maybe 4.5 feet tall, with a small body and large head, with giant black eyes but a tiny nose and mouth, and its most distinctive feature of all, completely gray flesh, the alien what conspiracy blogs across the earth would call a gray, stood before him. What are you staring at, low worlder? Was the first thing to come out of the creature's mouth, making Ben realize he'd been a bit rude. Sorry about that. Your appearance caught me a little off guard was all. You ain't too pretty yourself, it said while looking Ben up and down. Global Gork, stop fooling around. You know exactly why he's staring. Maybe if your people didn't suck so much he wouldn't have reacted like that, Carly told the gray, apparently Global Gork, off. These are both of our nation's summoned heroes? I assume, Mother? Thera asked. What exactly did his people do? Wait, he was summoned as well? So does that mean… Ben trailed off, but Carly knew exactly what he was asking. Well, it's a little more complicated, but basically yes. He's actually one of the aliens people would see on Earth, instead of the language system making appropriate connections between a race and a pre-existing concept like the succubi, his former classmate explained to him. Ben rested his arms on the table and placed his head in his hands. I really hate this world sometimes. He could only be grateful that he wouldn't have to suffer through all the crazies who thought they'd been abducted feeling like they were right. God, for all I know they really were right. Ben, come on, what's wrong? Thera asked again, looking for an answer from someone. Remember we once spoke about a race who discovered that one of the creatures from their legends actually existed? I'm currently going through that. She still seemed confused, so Carly took over the explanation. You're Thera, right? I'm his old classmate. Anyway, he's probably just a little uncomfortable about the fact that this bastard's people occasionally stop by Earth to play pranks on rednecks and military pilots instead of actually making contact. At least that's what bothered me when I found out, Carly explained, shooting the little alien beside her dirty looks. As an answer, it gave a very human-like shrug. What's the point in making contact with a bunch of low-worlders? Not like you lot have anything to offer but entertainment. Instead of giving a response, she kicked out his knee and walked over to the table as the small alien fell to the ground. Pelania. Abris. Thanks for having us for dinner. Thera's parents didn't seem to pay any attention to the little alien on the floor and immediately started to talk with Carly about how the day's been while Thera and Ben could only watch the exchange. So his race exists in your world then? Thera asked Ben. I guess? I mean, not my world, but looks like we share a universe. Still wrong, Globalgork yelled as he pulled himself up. My people exist in a much higher plane of reality. We aren't stuck in some pathetic lower level of existence. Thera turned to Ben. I'm pretty sure he's insulting you. But Ben couldn't give much of a response. This was a lot to process. Oh well, he's stuck in this universe too. Wait. He turned to the alien he decided should be referred to as Glob for the sake of convenience. Does that mean your race can travel across universes? Could you bring us home? The room fell silent when he asked it, but he had to know. Unfortunately, he got the answer he was expecting. Every one of you asked the same thing. No, do you think I'd still be on this doomed garbage planet if that was an option? Our bodies were remade from the materials of this universe, the small alien said dismissively. Even if the language system makes connections to materials from your universe when naming it, the finer properties like boiling point, melting point, atomic mass, and a bunch of other things are going to be slightly different. Not to mention my people don't travel across universes. We manipulate energies to create illusions to make people see us while peering into other realities ourselves. I see. Of course there was no going home. If there was, why would Glob still be here if he could get out? He felt a hand squeeze his under the table and looked to Thera and gave her a small smile, before turning back to Glob. So why do your people do that anyway then? If not establish contact, then what's the point? Glob looked at him as if the answer were the most obvious thing in the world. It's fun to toy with lowlifes, obviously. Ben looked at him incredulously before turning to Carly, who could only give a shake of her head. I wanted to be sure this prick wasn't just messing with me, so I asked for this to be confirmed with some of the others he was summoned with. Unfortunately, it looks like the answer to why we haven't heard from other intelligent life is because it sucks. Cool. Don't mind me, just gonna use my favorite strategy to avoid an existential crisis. Namely, doing his best to not think too hard about it. Carly, how have you been? How's working with the Succubus Kingdom? It's not too bad. Being teamed up with this guy sucks, but it's pretty exciting in its own way and the money's good. Training every day can be exhausting, but it's nice to keep busy. Other than that, not much I can say. How about you? What have you been up to since? Well, I've been working as an apprentice craftsman, he said, trying to move past the awkward conversation of him being left behind as fast as possible. I do a bit of adventuring on the side too with Thera. The last few months actually ended up being pretty fun minus a few hiccups. I'll bet. So you find yourself a job and end up friends with a princess, not too shabby, she said with a grin that he returned. I'll say, maybe the universe felt it owed me a little luck or something. When he thought about it, the few connections he had in the world were apparently a bit more powerful than he had initially thought. Thera and Sonia being related to royalty, even if they technically weren't royal themselves, was pretty cool. It also meant his teacher probably had some interesting things going on in his past to be close enough to an earth spirit and queen that their daughter thinks of him as an uncle. He was definitely going to have to probe him for information at some point. So you're one of the folks that decided not to take a kingdom's offer? Glob asked curiously. Thought you could make it on your own, huh? No nation made me any offers, Ben awkwardly explained, causing Glob to immediately break into laughter. Wait, you're the forgotten one? Oh man, it sucks to be you. Carly went to punch him, but a small force field seemed to materialize in front of her fist before it could reach his face. Though the queen's death glare couldn't be stopped. Globulgork enough. Ben is currently a guest, and if what he's created works, he'll have done a far greater service to the people of this world than you could have a chance to until the invasion starts. Mind your manners. What did you make? Carly asked out of curiosity. Does the system let you cause psychic damage with your paintings now? It's private, but no. Why is that the first thing your mind goes to? Ben asked her. Because I've seen some of your art in school. A guy tries to properly convey the theme he's given one time and nobody lets it go. He happened to like making regular paintings too. But heaven forbid anyone in his class ever brought those up. Actually, speaking of paintings, Thera interjected and dug through her bag, pulling out the painting they brought as a gift and handing it over to her parents. Sonia got Ben to paint this. She wanted us to bring it to you. The picture was of Thera and Sonia seated in their living room, looking like they were in the middle of a conversation, and Ben was pretty proud of how it turned out. He hadn't had access to a large range of colors, but he'd made perfect use of what he did have available, and clearly Thera's mom thought so, as well as small tears began forming in her eyes as soon as she saw the painting. Thera, this is absolutely wonderful. And Ben, you're the one who painted this? It's gorgeous. Oh, I'm going to need you to do some paintings for me. I'll make sure you're fairly compensated, of course. Yeah, sure. That's no problem, he told them. But a question arose in his mind. But couldn't you have gotten an artist to just wear a darkness resistance amulet? It seems like you have plenty around. Perhaps now I could, the queen said after giving it a moment's thought. But as Thera grew up, there simply wasn't an enchanter we could find with the skill level or darkness resistance to make one. We've spent a considerable amount of our own funds raising up an enchanter who came close to the necessary resistance once Thera was born. But even now those amulets can only get to a resistance of 24, so we have to ensure anyone working around her will still have a particularly strong will. It's good enough that any effects she has will be manageable for those around her at least, but still not perfect. This explanation only left Ben more confused though. Wait, that doesn't make sense. How could you only find an enchanter that could get up to 24 for its resistance? And what about Fawkes' amulet? Hasn't he used it to interact with Thera since she was a kid? From what my sister has told me, I'm aware your resistance levels make you quite the outlier, but the vast majority of people only have resistances up to 15. People like myself and Sonia who have even one resistance in the 40s are very unusual, and that's in one our race as a whole is considered to have in higher than average levels. Having found an enchanter who has a darkness resistance of 30 was quite the blessing for us, and we still had to spend almost 2 decades to get him to level 7 in enchanting. As for Fawkes, the sorts of materials and technique he put into making his own amulet aren't something we could hope to replicate on a large or even small scale, unfortunately. It was something he spent over a year making once Thera was born and he learned about her situation. That was more than he was expecting, to be sure. Getting Fawkes to explain how he had made his amulet was added to the ever-growing list of things he needed to bother his teacher about, but he also couldn't help but be a little shocked to hear how hard it was to find an enchanter that could add high resistances. Fawkes did once tell him he could make a living by enchanting with his resistances. Maybe he should make some simple amulets of every attribute in his spare time to make some money while he continued his training. With his agreement to make a few paintings secured, they continued to chat on for a while until food was served. Meals similar to what Sonia had made a few times while he had stayed with her, but significantly fancier. He couldn't help but wonder if they had a fully staffed kitchen in the back working throughout the day. But if the nation was as well off as he'd been led to believe, it shouldn't surprise him. Thinking about how wealthy the land was brought a question to his mind he had to ask. Hey Abris, I've been wondering, how do you find so much mithril? Can you summon it from other places or what? Well, I probably could summon it if I needed to, but that would be theft from whoever owned it or from whatever nation I rip it from the grounds of. Since I'm not allowed to start wars willy-nilly, I just do this. He held out his hand and Ben could see and feel the energies of the room changing and condensing around it, until suddenly it was gone, replaced with a small sphere of what Ben was sure was mithril. The earth spirit gently tossed it to him and Ben carefully examined it. Here, keep it as payment for your future paintings. Was that? He began, and Thera answered his question. Materialization. Dad's way of making the nation prosper. Materialization, directly changing mana into something else. It was considered the highest form of earth and water magic, and the mana cost was astronomical. Even if a person had the necessary skill level to pull it off, they frequently wouldn't have enough mana to truly make it worthwhile to use, perhaps managing to produce some pebbles or a mouth full of water. Wait, you're just making it out of nothing? That's insane. So you could make infinite magic materials with your level of power then. Ben knew spirits had access to some ridiculous mana pools and mana regeneration, so he couldn't help but view the person in front of him as an infinite material dispenser briefly before he was shot down. "No, that would most certainly kill me," Abris casually said. Thera went on to explain for her father. "When mana-based lifeforms like my father used magic, they're using their actual bodies to cast their spells. Use too much magic and they'll cease to exist." Ben was interested for about a second until he found himself gripped with panic. "Wait, does that mean when I got you to use an earth wave I almost killed you?" He felt his heart pounding, and it must have shown on his face since she placed a calming hand on his arm before answering. "No, you don't have to worry. While I have a high mana level because of my heritage, I'm carbon-based like you." "Well, presumably carbon-based, the point is I have a true physical body that isn't made of mana. The form you see my dad with is just a construct he chooses to use. Ordinarily, he would be nothing more than a mass of earth mana." He felt himself sigh in relief. He knew he had put them both in danger when they faced Roan's monster group, but he thought he had understood it. If she could have died from casting her spell, he wasn't sure what he would do. "So does that mean you can't shapeshift like your dad?" "Of course not," she said, sounding almost offended by the idea. "This is just me." After watching Ben panic for a bit and quietly laughing to herself, the Queen spoke up. "All right, this is as good a time to end dinner as any. Thera, take Ben to the spare room in your hallway. Abris will pick him up in the morning to lead him to the volunteers. Carly and Glob, it's almost time for your appointments. You don't want to be late." "Off to do something fun?" Ben asked his old classmate. "I was hoping to chat a bit more. I haven't seen another human in almost a year." "Yes, sorry, we'll have to meet up while you're here. I just have to go to, well, therapy," Glob stated. Being trapped in a world with a bunch of low-worlders would drive anyone insane. She couldn't help but roll her eyes at the small alien. "Okay, yes, therapy, but not for Glob's stupid racist reasons. A lot of otherworlders need a bit of help adjusting. Okay?" She looked at Ben, almost daring him to say something about it, but he had other thoughts on his mind, and a quick flickering of emotions across his face that only Thera noticed. "No worries, I get it. This is all still pretty crazy. Let's meet sometime later." Carly became a bit less defensive and gave him a parting smile. "Sounds good. Later then." With everything sorted for the day, they all parted. Thera led Ben to his room as he was lost in his thoughts. "And this is your room. I'll be just down the hall if you need anything, but for now I'll show you around," Thera said after bringing him where he would be staying. The room he entered was far larger than it needed to be, but when he considered the size of the building they were in that was supposedly for her family and the occasional political event, he shouldn't have been too taken aback. They'd had to go up a couple flights of stairs, and the room was more the size of a small apartment. But the bed looked incredibly comfy, so he wasn't going to complain. That and large windows that looked out into the city, he was sure it would be a comfortable stay, at least once he got his mind in order. He kicked off his shoes and walked over to the bed, then immediately flopped into it. "Thanks for showing me, Thera. I'll see you tomorrow." He laid there, preparing to sink into his thoughts, but he didn't hear the sound of footsteps leaving and raised his head to see her still standing there. "Something on your mind?" he asked, ignoring the siren song of the bed. "That's what I want to know. Are you doing okay?" "Of course, why wouldn't I be?" She didn't say a word, just quietly stared at him and waited. He could see she wasn't planning on giving up, so he did. "Fine, I don't know, jealous I guess? Self-pitying maybe? Just generally unhappy to learn that on top of everything else all the other summoned are getting. They're getting access to some actual mental help while I'm stuck sorting myself out. It's dumb and petty and I'll get over it." It wasn't something he liked saying out loud. It made him feel silly and small, but those were the feelings he was currently trying to deal with. Meeting Carly again just brought to mind how much better off everyone from his class was than him. It wasn't how he wanted to feel, but he couldn't escape it either. Thera looked like she didn't know what to say. Asking what was wrong was easy enough, but actually helping was a whole other issue, though she wanted to try anyway. Is that something you want? To work as a country's summoned hero, I mean? I know you're hiding that you're the one who made these braces, but if you reveal yourself as the creator to the world, I'm sure a lot of nations that ignored you before will be fighting over who would get you. Heck, my mom would probably be the first to make you an offer. I wouldn't be surprised if she does anyway. It hurt to say. Thera didn't really want Ben leaving Stonewall when he was her only friend and adventuring companion there. But if it would make him happier, not to mention help him deal with living in this world, how could she stop him? Much to her relief, though, he shook his head. No. Honestly, if this had come up in my first couple months I'd been here, maybe I would have. But I have a life now. I like learning from Falk and working with you. I like Stonewall too. It's a nice place to live. All of which makes how I'm feeling even dumber. You don't need to worry about me, Thera. I'll feel better once I get some sleep. All right, if you're sure. I am, he said, giving her his most confident smile. Anyway, come grab me and show me around town a bit tomorrow, okay? I need to see as much as I can while I'm here. Okay. I'll find you when you're done. Good night, Ben. Night, Thera. As she walked out of his room and closed his door, Ben continued to lay down, staring at the ceiling and trying to push away his thoughts for the night. As he opened his eyes and found himself in Myriad's divine realm, he couldn't help but notice his god looking slightly more radiant than usual. What's up, Myriad? You're looking brighter, I guess. Ho ho! Some good fortune has finally come my way, Ben. Sakhel has finally accepted me as her god. Not to mention that she's been giving me some prayers here, and they're ever since you told her about me. Now I finally have a second believer. Ever since he'd first told her about his god. Ben had met up with her a couple more times to talk him up and sing his praise, and it looked like it had just paid off. It was genuinely exciting stuff, though his first instinct was to point out that only 2 believers still probably put him at the least amount of any other god. Barring forbidden ones, of course, but he resisted to not ruin Myriad's mood. Though just by having the thought go through his head, his god was able to hear it and noticeably shrank. Oops. Trying to quickly rebuild some of the positivity that was just lost. Ben cheered him on. That's fantastic. Man, who would have guessed you would get another this soon? Ben certainly thought it would never actually happen, so this was quite the win. Myriad seemed to shake in exasperation, showing more emotion than what Ben would have expected from a sentient floating cube at least. You could stand to put a bit more effort in, you know. Now you only need to find me 4 more believers. Took a minute for Ben to figure out what his god was talking about. Right, the quest. Yeah, I guess I just need a few more. Huh. You forgot about it? Myriad said, deadpan and staring into him. No point in trying to hide it from someone who can hear your thoughts. It just slipped my mind is all. Can you blame me? I thought it was impossible. You could at least be a little more invested. I'll be raising your job level by 6 if you can do this for me. That honestly doesn't feel like much for the amount of effort it will take. That's more than a level per person. Plus, you're already pretty high into your craftsman job. If you can get this done before you complete it, you could be saving a bunch of time. Well, that's true. I should probably expect it for the one following this at the earliest, though. I'm pretty sure I'll be done this one in a couple months. That's a whole other issue. Aren't you feeling burnt out at all? No, why? You've been working too hard. Your level will rise with the amount of effort you put in, but yours has been going up surprisingly fast. I don't know what to tell you, Myriad. I'm having fun. Why wouldn't I work hard on something I enjoy? His god let out a long sigh. Easy to say, but not something many can truly put into practice. Okay, if you say it's nothing, then it's fine. In that case, what about your more emotional issues? It's nothing, just a little jealousy like I told Thera. I'll deal with it. If Myriad had a body, he'd be rubbing his head. The event of Ben's summoning nearly a year ago still weighed on the boy, but he didn't know how he could help. He had no experience leading hominid types, let alone humans. He didn't want his apostle to work himself to death to avoid confronting his feelings, but as far as he could see, the boy genuinely loved what he did, instead of just using it as a coping mechanism. So he put the matter on hold. Fine. Just remember you can come to me for advice. Part of my role is guiding my followers after all. When she'd woken up for the day, the sun had already risen. From the looks of it, it had been for a few hours. She had been feeling emotionally drained by the time she got to her room in the night, so she had promptly fallen asleep. Now that she was up though, she took some time to put her small amount of luggage away and pulled out some clothing she hadn't worn in the time since she'd left home. Once that was done, she turned to the bookshelf in her room. When she left her homeland, she had taken only a few of her favorites. But by this time she had reread them enough that she needed a change, and grabbed one off the shelf to dip into for a while. It was the legend of a lone Cilia hero, and how they fought off a small army of invaders on their homeworld, giving as much time as possible for people to escape. Like any story about the fall of a world, this one didn't have a happy ending. The world was still lost, but thanks to that one legendary figure's actions, scores of people had been saved. She was just about to open it for a read when she heard a knock on the door, so she left it at her bedside and went to answer. It was one of the house servants, asking her to come down to enjoy a late brunch with her mother. Since everyone should have an amulet on, she hadn't bothered to wear her cloak. But when she saw the look in their eyes, she immediately went back to grab it before letting herself be led down to the dining room. The arm brace Ben made her should have put her comfortably in the safe range for the amulets, where even weaker-willed people would be safe, but that wouldn't change the fear people felt. It was one thing to know a tool would keep you safe, but another to really put your trust in it. At least when she wore her cloak, it put something more visible between them. It made it easier for people if they couldn't actually see her. They made their way down to the dining room and found her mother already seated, with plates of food spread out in front of her and waiting. Pelania gave her a silent look, no doubt wondering why she was still wearing her cloak inside, before dismissing the servant, but immediately cut to the heart of the matter once they were gone. What did she do? Nothing. They just looked like they would feel more comfortable if I wore this. Don't worry about it. Can we not make a big deal of this for once? She silently begged, but it never worked out that conveniently. I'll relieve them of their duties here immediately then. You don't need to fire her, you know? Just give her some leave while I'm here. She had seen plenty of staff let go over the years for not being able to tolerate her magic, and the guilt was there each time. Her mother had a different view of things though. If the staff aren't fit to serve my daughter, then they aren't fit to work for me. Don't worry. I'll set her up with a decent job elsewhere. But I can't have someone here who isn't comfortable doing the work. Thera held in a sigh. She always hated dealing with the staff her mother hired. If they weren't falling to the effects of her magic, then they looked at her with discomfort in their eyes, always afraid that either their amulets or her cloak would fail, and that they would unexpectedly find themselves in a new line of work. Sure, there were some decent ones here she could interact with normally, but people had lives and would move on to other things if the need arose. Finding out how any new hires would react was always tough. Her mother, used to seeing where her train of thoughts was leading, brushed off the current topic of conversation in favor of a new one. So Thera, are you enjoying living out in Stonewall? Barring all of the ugliness of the last month, of course? She thought that there was a lot more ugliness than just the last month when it all came to a head. But if she ignored that, the answer was obvious to her. Yes, I've been having a lot of fun recently. A bright smile painting her face despite herself. And why wouldn't she be? Her hunts had been going more successful. She finally leveled up her earth magic, and soon she would be able to change her job from apprentice mage, which she'd been stuck on for a while. Not to mention that she had been eating decent meals when Sonia was working late at the clinic. She was winning a lot of lomage, and she had someone to talk to on a regular basis. Of course, her mother could see right though where her line of thought was going. It looks like your new friend has been good for you, she said with a teasing smile, though Thera could only groan as she thought back to the way her parents had acted the night before. Forget about it, Mom. Why did you have to be like that? It was mortifying. I just wanted to see what the first young man my daughter's grown close to was like. What's wrong with that? Okay, but did you have to say all that stuff about dating and grandchildren? Were you trying to traumatize me? Or did you just want to make sure I never bring a guest again? He's not really your guest, he's here on Fox's request. Still, she was willing to relent a bit. Though I admit I may have gone a bit overboard. I just wanted to get a feel for the boy my daughter may be spending her life with. Gods, you call that relenting? Why are you insisting that that's going to happen? I'm just happy having someone who isn't going to go insane around me. That isn't even to mention the issues of our lifespans. Ben will maybe live another 80 years tops, and well, who knows how long I will. It felt like her mother always knew what to say to get a rise out of her, whether the queen intended to or not, and it made her miss staying with her aunt all the more. At least Sonia was never this outrageous. Romance between races would always have to take into account lifespan. While a mixed breed could typically estimate their lifespan by averaging that of their parent races, spirits didn't have a limited lifespan, instead only dying if they were killed or their mana was used up too rapidly. Thera, being a cross between that and a succubus, which could expect roughly 200 years of life, wouldn't be able to know how long her lifespan would be until she had reached its end. A small chuckle came from behind her and a voice spoke up. It seems a tad silly to worry about a difference in lifespans with the fate of the world in the balance in the next few years. But why don't we put this on hold for now, Pelania? Thera turned and found what looked like a cloud of darkness, shaped in the form of a succubus standing behind her, and she broke into a grin. Auntie Funa, I didn't realize you were here. Funa opened her shadowy arms and invited Thera in for a hug. Your mother asked me to handle Carly's training and I couldn't refuse. It's wonderful to see you, child. Funa's establishment as Thera's aunt was a lot like Fox's relationship as her uncle. There was no blood between them. It was more to do with her relationship with her parents. Namely that she was the great darkness spirit, someone who had known her father since before the loss of their world, and essentially a living avatar of dark magic. Well, we'll at least put the conversation on hold for now. Pelania relented. Now come have a seat so we can enjoy breakfast. They all sat down to chat and catch each other up on life. Thera once again talking about the events of the last few months while Funa discussed how Carly's training had been progressing. She was essentially her first apprentice and she was quite proud of the work her student was putting in. Of course the offer to help train you is always open as well, you know, Funa said, not for the first time, but Thera politely declined. Perhaps one day she would want to take the time to train up her charm magic to get it to a level where she could control it, but for now it would only make her life more difficult if its power increased before it could get to that point. She was lucky her aunt was nowhere near as pushy as her mother and was willing to gracefully drop the topic without a fight. They continued on for a while longer before everyone finished eating and Pelania decided she wanted to move on to her next task of the day. Thera, I'm going to check on how things are going for your friend. Would you care to join me? You're of course welcome to join as well, Funa. I'll have to pass this time, Funa told them. I'll need to meet with Carly soon for her lessons. I'll join you. I told Ben I would show him around the town for a bit when he was done today, so it would be good to see how far off he is. Her mother could only laugh. Well, I think that will have to be moved to tomorrow, sorry. I scheduled enough appointments for the boy that he probably won't finish them until late into the night if he doesn't need to stop to rest. I just thought I would challenge him a little. She was about to tell her mom off, but the way Ben treated his work passed through her mind, and she decided that it would probably be fine. All right, well, let's go. Her lack of reaction left Pelania confused for a moment before she brushed it off and they walked out to where Ben was working. A small guest building had been constructed around back, she suspected by her father, and it was apparently where Ben was working to enchant all of the braces. As they neared it, though, her mother seemed to be confused. Did they wander off while they wait? Maybe just taking a break? Pelania muttered to herself. Something wrong, Mom? Oh no, just thinking out loud. Come on, let's see how things are going. They stepped into the room to find Ben and her father alone in the room and on the ground talking, with a long tube of metal between them. Myriad, do you seriously not have any idea what it might be? How do you destroy an entire planet without any technology? Ben let out a sigh. He says he doesn't know Abris. Are you sure you've never heard of it? I could easily have encountered it in my life, just not by that name, or it could be as Globalgork said yesterday about names being translated to match equivalents. Perhaps there simply isn't something similar enough that it would be called that name, or maybe its makeup is different enough that even if it does the same thing it wouldn't be recognized as such. God, what a pain, Ben said dejectedly. Looks like that's one dream down the drain, and today was going so well too. As he sat down and stared at the tube in front of him, someone took a seat to his side. "What's the matter?" Thera asked as she looked at what he and her father were staring at. "Oh hey. Since we finished up with all the braces, I thought I would try and get your dad to help me with something since he was here watching anyway. But it looks like it was a bust." "You already finished?" Penelia's surprised voice came from behind him before moving to her husband's side. "I had 40 people waiting for you. From what Sonia said, I thought it would take you a couple days." It seemed she wasn't even going to try and hide that she had given him an unreasonable amount of work. But it didn't much matter to Ben. They all had significantly less mana than Sonia, so it wasn't too hard. Plus my skill leveled up from being in contact with all of those different minds, so it got a little faster too. He had the chance to interact with 25 succubi and incubi, as well as around 15 members of a variety of other races with passive magics in the city. It really showed him the importance of practicing in a variety of ways instead of just interacting with the same people over and over again. "You gotta level up? Lucky," Thera said with a small hint of envy. He knew she struggled getting her own skills up, at least when it came to her magics, but he wasn't going to be keeping any secrets when it came to his skills around her if they were going to be working together. Who knew what could be necessary to save their lives when they were hunting one day? Which was why he also included his other bit of good news. "Actually, I also got a new skill called Hidden Mind. It looks like trying to keep my thoughts and feelings from leaking into 40 people paid off." The name seemed self-explanatory enough. It was a skill that hid his mind from others. He had just been trying to keep any of his lingering feelings from bothering anyone he dealt with today. But it looked like it worked out for him. Not that he was sure how many skills had mind-reading aspects to them like his own, but it didn't hurt to have at least. "So now when you practice you'll be able to hear my thoughts, but I won't be able to hear yours? That's not fair," she told him with a pout. "It's not that different yet here." He grabbed her hand and connected with her. Since his level went up again, it no longer felt like mutterings from her. Instead, right away he could tell she was embarrassed about having her hand held in front of her parents after the scene they made yesterday. And he let go. "How was that from your perspective?" She gave him a complicated look for a moment before answering. "Your thoughts were definitely more clear than before you leveled up, but it still mostly felt mumbled. I could, however, pick up on the fact that you had a pretty good idea what I was thinking." He tried to laugh it off. "How well, it is part of the package after all. I'm sure with some practice you could get the skill as well. Besides, since my connect leveled up, we should redo your brace later to see how much it affects it. At least since I got this, it should make it a bit easier for you to sleep." Fine. So what were you talking to Myriad about then?" "Myriad?" Pelania asked, looking around. She had certainly heard Ben say the name, but there was nobody else there. It was Abris who answered for her. "It seems our girls found herself an apostle. For a ridiculously minor god," Ben clarified. "You know it's true, and I don't want them to think I'm trying to tempt away their daughter with a powerful god." Penelia gave him an appraising look for a moment before continuing. "All right then, so what was the combined knowledge of an otherworld, a great spirit, and a god hoping to achieve?" It was here Ben deflated, losing all the energy he had from talking about his other successes of the day. "Trying to figure out what saltpeter is. Can you elaborate please?" She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but trying to figure out what sounded like a spice could be was not it. "I was trying to make a weapon from my world," he elaborated. "Something called a gun. I figured I would try and construct one in the simplest form I could think of and basically just make a metal tube, some ball bearings, and an explosive powder. The issue is the powder. From what I remember, it was historically made of sulfur, I think charcoal, and saltpeter. The big issue is that none of us know what saltpeter is, or even if it exists in this universe at all." "And you decided to make a weapon in my backyard?" the Queen asked with a raised eyebrow. She didn't seem mad, just curious about what led to this turn of events. Ben only shrugged. "I wasn't exactly keeping it a secret since I was getting your husband's help. I just figured while I had an earth spirit available who was willing to lend some aid, I would see how hard it could be. I wasn't expecting this to be the roadblock I would come across. I figured I would just be spending a few months trying to figure out what ratios I needed to make it work." "But why make this at all?" Thera asked him. "There are plenty of weapons you could already make, right? Or you could just buy something like a sword or a bow." I'm trying to cut out as much of the learning curve I can. As far as I can tell, both of those things need practice, not to mention I think my strength and agility attributes are a bit low, or at least low enough that I don't want to bet my life on them. I'm sure guns have some learning curve, but they seem lighter and more straightforward. Plus, when they were introduced in my world, swords seemed to be tossed to the wayside. Of course, since my world doesn't have magic or skills, I guess it's a bit hard to compare. So you're giving up? Thera asked him. Not sure what else I can do. I don't have much interest in being a fighter anyway. I just figured it would be good for a bit of extra protection in case things ever look bad while we're out. Not so fast, Pelania spoke up. Thera dear, you said you were planning on showing Ben around the city. Yes? Since he's done so early, why not take him out now and visit the crafting guild after? It's a real branch unlike what you'd have in Stonewall, which means there's going to be a proper guild library. You may be able to find some info there. Really, that's great. Ben almost cheered, life returning to his face. He grabbed Thera's hand and started to drag her along. Let's go right away. We have hours of sunlight left after all. Fine, no need to pull. I guess we'll be back for dinner later, Mom. Of course, you both have fun now. She watched them go off with a smile. The whole time the gears in her mind turned as plans were formed and changed. Ben, I know you're excited, but can we take a bit of a break? Thera couldn't help but ask. They had decided to look around the city for a couple hours before getting to the guild, but Ben had been rushing around like he wouldn't get the chance to see the city again once they were done. He had to go into any shop that caught his interest and got more food than he would ever possibly need from any cart that smelled tempting enough to him. It was getting ridiculous. We can go out again tomorrow, so let's take things a little slower for a bit. My bad, sorry. It's just all so exciting, you know? And why wouldn't it be? Analia was basically a fully modern city, skyscrapers and all, situated within a giant forest. It wasn't like anything he'd ever seen before. The people dressed in brightly colored togas, going about their daily lives, and there was street art to pass and monuments to see. He couldn't help but go full tourist from it all. Still, he eased up for Thera. Thank you. Come on, let's take a seat for a bit and eat some of your pile of food while it's fresh. I know a good place to sit ahead. She led him for about 5 minutes before they arrived at a small stone fence, at just the right height to act as a seat at the edge of the city. He was sure the view beyond was beautiful, but it was the fence that took his breath away. Holy crap! Thera, what the hell is this? He had run ahead and was peering down at it, running his hand along the stone. To an ordinary person it probably looked like plain rock, well put together but nothing special. To Ben, though, it looked divine. His mana sense had improved with his level, and while that would normally mean being able to feel the way mana was woven through something he was touching, still, whatever enchantment was on the wall made it positively glow to him. He could see the enchantments contained within what he thought was ordinary stone, but with a complexity and density that he was sure it should have shattered long before it reached its current state. Delicate weaves of mana he didn't know if he would ever be able to pull off himself were strung together as if in a tapestry, and he knew there was significantly more he couldn't make out. His sight was still too weak. He couldn't help but curse himself for not having a higher level of enchanting to properly examine what was before him, and swore that he would come back here again. There were things he could learn in this wall. I'm honestly a little jealous your sense is so good at your enchanting level. I'd love to know what the magic of a god looked like with my own 2 eyes, she said, dropping a bombshell on him. I'm sorry, a god? She nodded. This is the entrance to the trial of Analia and Talona. When the Succubi homeworld was conquered, survivors were taken into the trial for safety as Analia used all of her strength to escape. This fence is the boundary to keep people out that aren't facing the challenge. Wow, Ben let out, wonder overtaking him for a moment before he needed to ask a question. But isn't this a little short to be keeping people out? In response, she grabbed his hand and tried to pass it over the far edge of the fence, only to have something stop it. I don't know all of the magics within it, but one of them acts as a boundary. It doesn't hurt, so it's fine to sit and lean against, but you won't be getting through. But I wanted to see what the enchantments looked like on the other side. The only way to do that would be to take the trail, and I personally wouldn't recommend it. A lot of people die facing trials unprepared, she warned. removing the thought of trying to sneak in from his mind. Noted. That's all right, I could probably spend weeks looking at a small portion of it. How big is the place anyway? When he looked down the length of the fence, he could tell that it was large. It looked like it had a slight curve in it, but it went on for a while. From the outside, it's a circle about 2 kilometers across. Inside, though, I've heard it's bigger. Not sure if that's true, though. It can be a bit hard to learn anything about what it's actually like in there. The entire nation was built around it once it was brought to this world, though. Ben felt like he had a million more questions, but the food was calling to him, so he put it on hold. They took a seat and leaned against the invisible barrier that kept them from the trial and chatted for a while as they ate. Ben talking about what he was enjoying and recipes he wanted to learn, while Thera carefully slid food under her hood to keep it from getting dirty and adding her own opinions on what he should learn. They carried on like that for a while before he asked a question in idle curiosity. "Hey Thera, what's your mana sense like anyway?" Mana sense wasn't an independent skill as far as he understood it, but instead allowed people to see or feel magics related to their particular magic skills. Since Ben's only magic skill was enchanting, it allowed him to see the magic that went into enchantments, and he was surprisingly good at it seemed. But he had no clue what Thera's was like. Could she see other earth mages prepare their spells, or maybe feel the charm leaking from other succubi? Maybe she could see her own mana, but it would block out anyone else's so she wouldn't see their effects. The actual answer ended up being completely unexpected. "My magics are both too low to really see anything about them currently. I can see spirits though." "Can't everyone?" he asked. "I thought I could see your father well enough yesterday." She thought for a moment before answering. "Ben, what do you know about spirits?" "Not too much," he admitted. "There are spirits for every element of mana, right? And they're all incredibly powerful. Seeing your dad materialize mana was awesome." "Well, you're sort of correct. My dad isn't a spirit, he's a great spirit. When the last great earth spirit died on his homeworld, a bunch of regular spirits you can't normally see merged to form a higher being. These regular spirits are not really everywhere. Dad says in his original world the planet was dense with them, but not many were saved. Since their lifespan is infinite, they don't really reproduce much, but I'll typically see 1 or 2 floating around a day." "Okay, that's actually really cool. I can't believe there's an entire race hidden on the planet. So what are spirits like? Can you talk to them?" Ben's eyes were shining with curiosity, so Thera was happy enough to tell him a bit, as long as the topic didn't focus on the other great spirits. While she got along with a couple of them like her father and aunt, some of them were a bit harder to deal with. It's a bit hard to interact with them because the way they think is pretty different from most hominid types, or really most other races in general, since they don't strictly have brains, but water, earth, air, and fire spirits all like talking about their own elements and anything they find interesting going on with them, while light and dark, and life and death spirits tend to be a bit more interesting, talking about different events or trends they see, though they can be a little hard to understand. Occasionally trying to discuss topics I don't think actually have proper ways to define as far as our language goes. They're all nice enough, but not really people I can interact with regularly, you know? "And what about space and time spirits then?" he asked, eager to learn more. "They must have something interesting to say when they interact with those elements." "I wouldn't know, there aren't any," she said with a shrug. But seeing the question on his lips, he immediately elaborated. "Long before the world was taken over, all the space spirits decided to leave to explore the universe, and all the time spirits went to see the end of it. And they never came back? The time spirits couldn't. There's a world of difference between going forward or stopping time to traveling back it. As for the space spirits, nobody knows. Dad says it's one of the greatest mysteries the great spirits talk about." As the words left her mouth, she cursed herself. She had sent it up perfectly for Ben to ask something she didn't feel much like talking about, so she quickly moved them along. "Anyway, why don't we finish up here and get to the guild? I'm pretty sure I'm not going to see you for a week after you see it. Come on. I'm not that bad. Pretty sure you're never seeing me again. Goodbye, Thera. This is my home now. We close in about 5 hours," a friendly staff member said as they walked by. "You close? Stonewall's guild never closes?" he asked, crestfallen. "That's mostly an adventurer's guild," Thera told him. "They're always open in case of emergencies." Ah, so lame. In front of him were rows and rows of books on various topics, with all of the ones before him being in the public domain. There were shelves of the more popular patented ideas as well, but he wasn't looking to spend money to use someone else's ideas in the things he would make and sell, so it was better at the moment to not even touch them and risk using one by mistake. He asked for one of the guild staff to point him towards books on different materials and their properties, and he came away with 5 large volumes to flip through. You aren't finishing all of those before they close, Thera told him. Not even going to try to. I'm just going to flip through them to see if anything pops out. If this is going to be too boring, you can head back, Thera. I'll probably be here until I'm kicked out. She shook her head. I'll stay. My parents are being a bit too comfortable acting like themselves around me at the moment. If I give them some space, they may calm down a little. Suit yourself. Ben cracked open the first book while Thera looked for something that she could read to pass the time, though Ben doubted how much luck she would have. She seemed to lean towards history and fiction, not technical manuals. Of course, he never would have sat down to read anything like this himself if he wasn't tossed into this world. Now that it was his job, it became significantly more interesting. As he spent hours skimming through hundreds of pages, he learned about numerous materials he would be interested in working with one day for their unique and interesting properties, but none matched what he was looking for. Sure, there were plenty that seemed to be explosive in the right conditions, but Ben wasn't even sure if saltpeter was an explosive chemical, or if it was something mined or organic for that matter. All he had was a name to go off of, and for all he knew, it was the process of combining it with charcoal and sulfur that made it work. Once he closed the last volume, he gave up. He wouldn't be bringing guns to this world, at least not right now. Maybe he would see if Pelenia would help him send some letters to the various classmates. He didn't know how to contact to see if they could help him out at all. But for the moment, he would just have to do his best not to let any other creatures sink their teeth into him. He put his books away, a bit dejected, before wandering through the aisles for the last hour. There were a lot of titles he found interesting that he decided he would be coming back to read later, and occasionally he found something that sounded intriguing enough that he needed to open it and give it a flip through, but he didn't have the time to throw himself into his reading the way he wanted to. He kept a mental list of things to read later and went to find Thera. She had been seated beside him, reading through a book despite what he had expected, and he got her attention. What did you find? She looked up and saw that they were about to start closing up, so she returned it to its shelf. It's the use of earth magic spells in enchanting. It was interesting, but nothing that could really help me improve. That's too bad. Well, Dad's going to want to try practicing with me soon anyway, so we'll see how it goes. I wish I packed more than one staff. Can't we get you a new one in town to use? She shrugged. I can, but aside from Fox, yours are probably the best. That wouldn't be disgustingly expensive. Considering how long they last, that's pretty sad. He thought, but he decided to keep that to himself and take it as a compliment. Well, thanks. My enchanting went up since I made your last one too, so hopefully the next one I'll make will be even better. I'll look forward to it. Even though her face was covered, he felt like she was smiling. They joined her parents for dinner, though this time Carly and Glob were unavailable, and spoke about the plans for the immediate future. Since Ben seems to be a faster enchanter than I expected, I don't have anything set up for you tomorrow, and I was planning on giving you the following day to rest. So use the next 2 for whatever you'd like, Pelenia told them. I'm receiving reports from the various embassies, though, that their independent testing is showing the braces you've made today are working as advertised, and they want to start commissioning more from you immediately. Wow, okay, sure. But I haven't really worked out a price for them. I don't know what would be fair. Not to worry, Falk recommended a price I feel is more than fair, perhaps a little too reasonable even, but I don't think you'll have any issue with it. Speaking of, I need to transfer you the money for the ones you've already made today. With that, the Queen got up and walked over to Ben, tapping her card against his own. He looked at the amount transferred and felt his eyes bulge, quickly doing some mental math. This seems a bit high, he said, in his heart feeling reluctant to part with the money he was just given. At this price, each one is enough to live off of for like a week. He prepared to return most of the money to Penelia, but she flat out refused him. There's no issue. I've already deducted the cost of materials and labor for making the braces themselves. It works as advertised and it's significantly less cumbersome than a cloak, which can go for at least 3 times what we're looking at selling yours for, mind you. Not to mention you're currently the only person who can make them. Given the ease of production, as soon as more people get the skill to make them, the price will start going down. But for now this could still be considered low. Should your identity as the inventor ever be revealed, though it should earn you quite a lot of goodwill with the various nations buying them. What she didn't say was that it was likely many of the nations had already started to investigate him. Since he elected to keep his identity a secret with the guild, if any nation tried to actively pursue him, they would likely come into conflict, but it wouldn't stop them from using this time to create the best sales pitch they could if he ever wanted to go public. Ben felt dizzy. For an afternoon's work, he had almost made enough to live for a year. If he included what he had left from the church and earned with Falk, he was past that. With the Queen talking about setting up more appointments, he was uncomfortable in ways he couldn't properly explain. What should I even do with all this money? He asked, a little unsure of himself. But Penelia seemed happy to help him out and put things in perspective. Ben, it may seem like a lot of money now, and to an extent it certainly is a lot to get all at once, but there are plenty of purchases that could use it up just as fast. You could spend it all on a large payment for a house or some rare items, or order materials you wouldn't be able to acquire without that sort of capital. It's a lot of money, but it could easily be gone in a flash, so either use it up quickly to get it out of the way, or use it wisely. Besides, it's not like you'll be able to sell them once you leave here if you plan on keeping your identity a secret. He didn't understand what she meant by that at first before realizing she was right. If he was the only one who could make them, then fitting the enchantment to each person would pretty obviously show who he was. Now that he was thinking about it, that was a huge issue in itself, but Pelania at least helped ease his concerns over his newly acquired wealth. Yes, it was a lot of money to get at once, but it was nothing compared to the millionaires and billionaires of Earth who would make that much in a day or a week or a month, and surely there would be plenty of wealthy individuals in this world making far more than that. Considering he was with the queen of a nation and a spirit that could make rare magic metals essentially from nothing, he suspected he was seated with 2 at the very moment. Okay, you're right, I may have gotten a bit overwhelmed. I'll buy a couple things I was too poor for before and just save the rest for now until I have something worth doing with it. Good boy, and of course if you want the money to keep coming in, there's always an option. The Queen told him with a smile. Oh, work for my kingdom, she said, immediately shocking the boy and leaving him speechless, an issue his friend did not have. Mother, Thera yelled. Even if you know he's the one making them, the guild isn't going to like you trying to take someone who wants their anonymity. The Queen only shrugged. While it's true that plays a part in it, there are plenty of other reasons to want the boy now that I've gotten my eye on him. An enchanter with that sort of speed is rare, and with an invasion coming, someone who can add such incredibly high resistances to any armor would be a godsend. Frankly, I should probably fire the diplomat who let such a promising young man slip through my fingers, though it looks like any nations going to your region made the mistake of looking at combat strength alone. Don't just fire people on your whims. And that doesn't matter anyway. Ben likes his current life, right, Ben? Thera turned to him and he nodded his head. She's right. Thank you for the offer, but I'll have to decline. I still have a lot I want to learn from Falk anyway. Quite all right, she said happily. Just remember the offer's on the table if you change your mind in the future. The Queen dropped the matter easily enough, and soon they slipped back into casual conversation again, with mostly Thera catching up on what's been happening in Analia while she was away, when she asked a favor of her mom. My hair's starting to get a little long. Would you mind cutting it for me? If you ever need a haircut in Stonewall, I probably could help you out, Thera. He cut in. I don't know if it would be directly tied to my crafting, but I'm sure some of the skills would cross over enough that I could manage. She started fiddling with a strand that was just a bit past her shoulders. I'm just used to having Mom do it, so I didn't consider it, but next time I'll try and get you to do it if you don't mind. It's a good way to make some extra money out there anyway. What? Why? How? He couldn't see a connection between getting a haircut and earning money, no matter how much he thought about it. She thought for a minute before explaining. I guess it shouldn't be a big deal if I tell you, but do me a favor and keep it to yourself. My hair doesn't just look golden. It is gold. Ben felt the gears of his mind start to shift and turn. What? But then, Thera, could I see one of your hairs real quick? he asked with such earnestness that she plucked one without a fight. He felt it in his fingers and examined it. He hadn't worked with gold before, but he had felt hair. This had the right texture and feel to it when he moved it around in his hand. Even after having been removed from her head, it didn't immediately change to having more gold-like properties. It gave him an idea. He went up to her, grabbed her shoulders, and looked deep into her eyes, surprising her with his sudden boldness. He had to do it, though. He needed to sincerely convey himself to her. Thera. He spoke with a passion-filled voice that left everyone in the room wondering what he would say. Let me use your body. Ben's hands were wrenched away from her, secured with metal shackles behind his back, and an earthen spike pressing against his jugular. Oh my! Her mother giggled. Aren't you a bold boy? Honey, for our daughter's safety, I think it would be best to dispose of him quickly. We'll apologize to Falk and send him a replacement apprentice, said her father, the one currently binding his hands and threatening his life. Thera had her face hidden in her hands to hide her blush from Ben's statement before talking to her parents. Both of you calm down. I'm sure Ben meant something else than what it sounded like. Ben, for his part, was a little distracted by the spike pressed against his throat, but still spoke to defend himself. Absolutely. Sorry, I meant I want to use her body for crafting materials. For more spikes pressed into his throat. All right, honey, enough of that, her mom said, trying to quell her husband's sudden anger. Ben, as a reasonably new resident in this world, I'm not sure if you're aware, but making materials out of sapient races is an extreme criminal offense pretty much everywhere. In the past, there were a few races that were almost wiped out in order to use their parts. Now, bearing that in mind, what do you want to do with my daughter? The spikes were moved about a foot away, but they didn't disappear. Still, it was enough for him to breathe. I didn't know, sorry. I probably could have explained better. I'm just feeling pretty damn inspired at the moment. I was just thinking that despite being made of gold, the properties of it have changed to more resemble hair since it was part of her body, but it's still metal. Her mana moves around inside her naturally all the time without causing harm, so I was thinking we could use however much hair she cuts off to make the core of a staff. If her mana can move through it the same way it can for the rest of her body, then maybe a staff made with it wouldn't explode if she ran her mana through it. Still, I didn't know what you just told me, so I can see it's probably not a good idea. Sorry. He tried to sound heartfelt, but after his explanation, Thera had made up her mind as well. Let's do it. Are you sure? It's not something I think I could pull off immediately. I'm hoping to get my crafting level up, maybe 2 more first. The main thing is if you'd be willing to grow your hair out longer so we'd have more to work with when the time comes. All right, I'll put getting a haircut on hold then, she said without hesitation. If it could get me a better staff, then it will be worth the wait. Great. Now that that's done, do you mind releasing me? He asked Abris, who still had him chained and bound. With a wave of his hand, the Great Spirit freed him, the chains and spikes remerging with the floor they were originally a part of. Sorry about that, Abris told him. In my time, I've seen plenty of species and mixed breeds hunted for their parts. I've always been worried someone may see Thera as some particularly rare magical ingredients. Fair enough, sorry I wasn't more clear to begin with. He could certainly understand why that would be a worry. Has that sort of thing happened to any other half-spirits before? You didn't tell him then? Penelia asked Thera with a raised eyebrow, but Thera only shrugged. There was never any real reason to bring it up, she said in a tone making it clear it wasn't really a topic she wanted to spend too much time on, before turning to Ben. I'm the first half-spirit, so nothing like that has happened before, but growing up there was some worry that someone may try something since spirits are so potently magical. Oh, neat. From her general demeanor as she spoke, he decided to leave well enough alone and wasn't really sure where to bring the conversation. But thankfully her mother seemed to be feeling merciful, calling for dessert and then brought an end to the night. He awoke early the next day and immediately ran off to the guild. Thera was still asleep when he left, but she would doubtlessly know where to find him when she woke up. And if she wanted to join him, she would. There was just a small problem. It was still closed when he got there. Without much to do until he was let in, he wandered around, looking at the few shops that were open, hoping something would catch his eye. He had money to spare now, and it wouldn't hurt to pick up a couple things while he was out. and in a world filled with magical tools there were a lot of tempting options. Myriad said while Ben worked. What? The spatial bag? Sure, it's not the largest one I could have gotten for that price, but my mana is too low to keep it charged, so springing a bit more for one that uses some mithril was a good investment, even if it was pricey. As Ben had wandered around, looking for anything that caught his eye, he managed to find a reasonably priced spatial bag and knew that he had to have it. It screamed fantasy to him more than anything else he'd seen. Plus, they were convenient. It was the size of a regular backpack but could fit about a cubic meter of space. They wouldn't have any issue taking their luggage home with it, and they would be able to carry far more staves to test in the future. Myriad could see the logic in it, even if he found it a bit extravagant. The issue was more why Ben was sitting outside the guild sewing as he waited for it to open. Making the braces involves weaving mana, and it looked like the boundary to Analia's trial had some seriously complexly woven enchantments. I figured if I am going to be doing more of that in the future, I could practice with an actual needle and thread. I have a little experience with it anyway. But it never hurts to get more. While he was out, he found a lovely little shop selling cloth, needles, and thread, as well as some beginner and intermediate books on sewing. With all that available, of course, he was going to give it a try. I do a lot of cooking anyway, it will come in handy. He had just finished putting together a big, floppy chef's hat, as well as making a nice apron. I'll have you know that Kiss the Cook aprons are a proud part of my culture. Besides, only humans will be able to read it. If I'm ever able to meet up with Steph or Will again, I'm sure they'll get a kick out of it. Ben's father would always wake up early on weekends to make breakfast for his family, and the apron was part of his signature look. He had fond memories of that sort of thing, and it reminded him of home in a nice little way. Myriad was at least able to pick up on this, even if he wasn't in agreement with his apostle's fashion choices. At the end of his second week in the nation, Ben just finished reading and rereading a passage he found in the guild archives after a long morning of enchanting and found himself running back to Thera's home at full speed. He had just been skimming through any book that caught his interest, making notes on what to read more carefully later and what pages had information that he found to be more useful or worth researching further when he came across a concept he had never heard of before. It was just a short chapter in a dusty tome that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. But it was more exciting than anything else he'd learned at that point, and he wanted to immediately grab his friend to test it out. When he got back, he ran into a servant and stopped them to see where he could find her, before being directed to the yard on the other side of the house where he was working to enchant the braces. Racing without a care, he left the building, turned a corner, and was almost immediately flattened by a flying rock. The only thing saving him was a nearly invisible force field springing up in front of him. "Gotta be more aware of your surroundings, sweetheart," Abris yelled out. "Wouldn't want to hurt your friend." "It's good training for me at least," Glob said. Maybe he should stick around to help as target practice. It wasn't clear if she heard her father or Globalgork. She was already rushing towards him at full speed. "Ben, I'm so sorry, are you all right?" Thankfully, he was fine. It seemed in the time he was in the guild reading, Thera had been practicing her magic with her father and Glob as Carly, and a person he had come to learn was Glob's barrier magic instructor, sat to the side. Thera was taking this opportunity to get as much practice in as she could. Her parents had a number of craftsmen producing about a dozen staves a day, basically giving Thera free rein to break as many as she needed to, and it appeared in that practice Ben was almost a casualty. Lucky for him, Glob was there and aware of their surroundings. Despite coming off as an ass, he did properly block Thera's spell before it could reach him. He couldn't help but feel a little jealous that she was using the work of other craftsmen. Worse still, that she was able to get about 4 or 5 shots from each staff. He knew her earth magic had gone up since she last used one of his, which meant her control had gone up too, and his own products would probably last longer. But until he saw it with his own eyes, he would feel a competitive flame flickering within him. Not only that, but with his crafting and enchanting having gone up as well, he was sure he would be able to make something much better, especially once he started on implementing the new enchanting trick. He'd just read they may not even need to make another for weeks as long as they were careful. "I'm fine, but that's not important. Give me your staff." She could feel the excitement coming off of him, and she handed it over without any resistance. "I've already used that one 3 times. Are you sure you don't want a newer one?" "No, this is actually perfect. Think you only have 1 or 2 shots left in it." I've been getting 4 shots from the staves made by this smith, so it should only be 1 left. Perfect. He grabbed on and ran his mana through it, feeling where microfractures had formed throughout the rod, weakening it in a very real way. He spent a few moments applying his enchantment before handing it back. All right. Mind shooting it until it breaks? She looked at it and shrugged before firing an earth bullet. When the staff was still whole in her hand, she looked at it in surprise but fired a second shot. Still unbroken, and she went for a third, only for it to shatter in her hand. How did you do that? She asked in excitement. Sacrificial enchantments. I found out about them in the guild. They're set up to take some of the brute of any mana passing through them and break. It wasn't as effective as I hoped, but still getting 1 extra shot is fantastic, especially if I'm around to set it up again each time. We could seriously get a lot more lifespan out of your staves. Interesting, Abris said after watching the display. Why have we never heard of these before? Ben had wondered the same thing at first, but after thinking it over on the way there, he thought he could understand why. I would think it's probably because they aren't thought of as very useful. There aren't many cases where enough mana could accumulate to destroy an item or enchantment unless it's intentional, and you would need to have an enchanter on standby to fix it each time. Usually there are just better ways you could make things instead, so this technique went unnoticed and expired into the public domain, just waiting for me to get my hands on it. You guys go back to practicing. I'll take some time to apply this to the rest of the staves you have available. He sat down and watched them practice as he worked. They only had 6 staves left, so it should have been a quick process, but he wanted to examine them as he went. Ben had originally wondered why they simply didn't have some higher quality staves made, but it looked like it came down to the fact that it wouldn't look good for the leaders of a nation to monopolize their country's high-quality items, given that they would just take a bit longer to be destroyed. Nor would it be good to deplete the nation's stock of rare materials that went into making high-quality goods. By buying large amounts of lower-quality staves, they were able to make sure less valuable materials were used, as well as ensuring a steady source of work for the people making them, at least as long as Thera was in town to use them up. What resulted were staves of an adequate quality, but even if they weren't as good as his teachers, that didn't mean there wasn't anything he could get from them. Each one was a work of art in its own way, being forged by smiths or woodworkers into something ornate and fit for the daughter of a queen. It was only a shame that all the hard work to make something so beautiful was immediately destroyed after a few uses. In that regard, at least he was sure he had the right idea. If Thera wanted an artistic staff, he could make her one once she had good enough control of her magic. Once that was done, he watched Thera and Glob sparring, with Thera on the offense and Glob acting completely defensively. As Thera threw earth bullets at him, it was clear that Glob had the advantage in skill and technique, presumably from being summoned with a higher form of a skill. Thera was still able to put up a fight from the raw power she displayed. The only thing that held the fight back from being impressive was how she needed to run back to him each time to trade out staves or get a new enchantment placed on it. Still, it helped their small battle stretch on for far longer than it otherwise could have. The next time she came to him, though, Ben asked her a question. "Why are you still only using Earth Bullet?" "It's not ideal, but in a fight, I want to be able to use as many spells as I can. I tried using Earthen Spear and manipulating my bullet's course, but in both cases I was only able to fire 2 shots because of the increased mana expenditure. My Earth Bullet is plenty powerful, so as long as I can be comfortable firing them off and watch my aim, it should be safer." "Okay, but this is practice, not a real fight, and it's not like you're alone. Come on, let's try something." He got up and grabbed her hand, connecting with her. "Use whatever spells you want. I'll try and keep your staff functional as long as possible, and we'll see how it goes." He didn't hide his mind from her, so she could tell exactly what he wanted to do through the connection. With a small look and a nod, she started her spell. Ben could see Abris perking up off to the side. He had heard how things went the last time he tried to lift some of the burden from her staff, but Glob had no idea and was acting cocky. "You're going to fight me with a craftsman clinging to you? Lowworlders really are a bunch of weirdos." She ignored his taunts and provocations, though, and cast her spell. Ben felt the mana pass through the staff and worked to strengthen any weakened areas of it, while at the same time applying and reapplying sacrificial enchantments as they broke. He was slower than he wanted to be, but knew it was still his first day using them. He would improve. Glob quieted down when he saw Thera use a different attack for the first time that day. Two dense earthen spears, each as long as a person, were pulled to the ground and fired at him. He immediately threw up a barrier, but only one crashed into it, destroying the spear in the process. The other one changed directions in the air and started to circle him at a distance, ready to try and impale him at a moment's notice should he let his guard down, but he never did. He switched from creating the barriers as needed to having a round one completely surrounding him. It was probably significantly more mana-intense, but he had seen the way Thera's spells destroyed her staves and was willing to try and outlast her. Thera wasn't willing to wait and went on the attack, all at once hammering one spot on his barrier with the last spear with as much force as she could muster. It almost looked like it would break through, but they didn't have the luck. "Ha! Suck on that!" Glob yelled at them, confident in his victory, before the earth shook and brought him to the ground. Thera's staff turned to dust in her hand, Ben's crafting and enchanting not able to keep up with whatever spell she was about to attempt. "What was that last one?" he had to know. "I just tried to swallow him into the earth," she casually told him. "I thought given how it turned out when we did an earth wave it would work out." Scary. Being buried alive seemed like a bit much for a sparring match, but he kept that to himself, instead focusing on the technical aspect of why it failed. "We could only pull off an earth wave that time because we had one of Fox and used staves. Honestly, with how much damage the staff had already received, I think it held up great." "It was great," she said while beaming. "We should fight like this more often. Think of how well our hunts would go." "Nope. This should stay our trump card in case of emergencies. If I'm always easing the burden on your staves, there will be no reason to work on your control. Plus then I'd have to always be with you. You don't want to be dependent on me, do you?" She deflated at his argument. No. It's just so much easier this way. Anything worth doing is worth working for, sweetheart," Abris said as he walked up to them. Though that was rather impressive. "It's hard to take that work-hard attitude of yours seriously, Dad, when you can use earth magic as easily as breathing." "Hey now, I work hard on other stuff. I am currently trying to learn non-attribute magic from Globalgork's teacher." "Currently" is a bit of an understatement, the incubus in charge of Glob's training said. "A long decade of practice with no payoff isn't a short period of time for most mortal races." "A decade? Even if non-attribute magics are hard to get, shouldn't it still be pretty easy with the amount of mana you have?" Ben asked. "Maybe for other races, but I'm so tightly bound to my element that I'm not even sure it's possible to use spells without it. Still, it's fun to try," Abris said with cheer. "You never know what skill could pay off in a unique way." "Ignoring that though," said Carly after watching the battle herself. "How did you help her do that? Did you learn a buff skill or something?" She hadn't been participating in the training herself this time because her magics wouldn't help the other two with the sort of practice they needed. But she'd watched long enough that she was sure Thera couldn't pull something like that off alone. "Using a few of my skills in tandem lets me feel Thera's mana pass through the staff so I can strengthen any weakening sections of it, and I was trying to rebuild the enchantments as fast as they were being destroyed. I'm sure we could do better once I get a bit more practice with the technique, but it's already shown it could work, which is all I wanted from today." "I would say that's enough for now anyway," Abris chimed in. "You've all had plenty of practice. Let's stop for a meal." Everyone else seemed ready to go, but Ben stopped them. "Before that, Thera, could I have a hand? There's a couple things I want to test."